Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight we have guest Dr. Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. I've been so looking forward to having this guest on. I've been loving her book. Highly recommend it to anybody who's ever had an interest in possessed objects, ancient cultures, history, in itself. I've always been a history buff. I wanted to be Indiana Jones when I was a little kid. So this is a big show for me. I'm really excited to have Heather on, and you can talk to her tonight too as well. Later in the show, we will open up the phone lines where you can call in and ask her questions. And I'm telling you, you definitely want to talk to her. She sounds like a really fun person. So I think we're going to have a stellar show. And of course, we have a lot of weird to cover on the World Wide Web of Weird. So we'll get to that. And don't forget, help us out. I'm using an app called StreamYard tonight. It lets me show comments from the YouTube and Facebook chat rooms on the screen. It's great, but it costs money. So you want to help out this show, go to our Patreon page. You'll find it in our chat rooms. Jamie will be sharing it. Hopefully Rob will be joining us later. He'll share it in the chat rooms with you. And just go look for Jason Bland Paranormal Soup on Patreon. Help us out. $2 a month. You'll get exclusive access to our upcoming podcasts. You're going to be just on there. But let's go ahead and get rolling into the show. There's my weird audio thing. Weirdness tonight. We'll see what's going on. But welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland. As I said before, our guest is Dr. Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. I've been loving this book. Actually, got a copy of it. You see it right there on the screen, but I got my own copy here. I've been loving this book. Highly recommend it to anybody who, if you just love history. I mean, for one, but especially dark, evil history. We're going to get into some of that tonight. All right, I got my beautiful co-host with me, Jamie D. I'm still getting used to StreamYard controls, and one of the funky things tonight is my mouse is being really weird on me. Later, how you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Glad to finally get to do the show. We had to reschedule her. She had some dental issues like I did once, so dental nightmares. So I'm glad she was able to reschedule. We're going to get her on because this is such an awesome topic to get into. I think I got to ask her. I think if I remember right, somewhere in bio, she might have done some stuff with Ancient Aliens too. I don't know, but I'm a big fan of that show. Even when they get stuff wrong, they do. I'm a big fan of all the ancient cultures, Mesopotamia, Sumer. I'm not an archaeologist or a big historian, but I've always had a huge interest in it. I would love to be more knowledgeable of it. Like I said, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I was looking at either an astronaut or archaeologist. It was one of the two, either Han Solo or Indiana Jones. So what I wanted to do as a kid. Rob hopefully be joining us later. I have to run the World Wide Web of Weird. It's the first time I've done it with StreamYard. They do have a screen share. I didn't actually get a time to really check it out, so I'm gonna use my old-fashioned one. Technical stuff for you people, but bear with me as I try to do the World Wide Web of Weird without Rob. It's hard. It's so nice in the StreamYard thing when he does it because he can share his screen and control that while I read the article. So hopefully he'll be on with us later, at least help us out in the chat room. But let's go ahead and roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web Weird, you knew I was going to have to get into this. It's from TMZ. When Mr. Zach Baggins has bought an infamous house from the Charlie Manson murders. Not the house where Sharon Tate and them died. A house, I think, was the second night of the murders. Yes, Zach Baggins is going to be neighbors with David Omen. Is that what that means? Is it that in that same neighborhood? That's a scary thought. For those listening on our Paranormal Soup radio channel, we are a webcast as soon as I can get my mouse to work. This is giving me so many technical things tonight. But we are a webcast. You can watch the show on Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup or on our Facebook page. Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. Man, this mouse is screwing me up. I can't even talk. And you can watch us on our YouTube channel, Paranormal Soup, or under Jason Bland. But tonight's show, guest Heather Lynn, we'll have her on after the World Wide Web of Weird. But let's go ahead and get to this first article here. Manson murder house sold to Ghost Adventures star Zach Bagans. So one of the homes that became a gruesome murder site at the hands of the Manson family has been sold appropriately to Zach Bagans, the star of Ghost Adventures. This is from TMZ. The house was owned by Lino and Rosemary LaBanca. The couple brutally murdered by the Manson family members. Rosemary was stabbed 41 times. Lino, if I'm saying that right, I'm sorry, 12 times. The August 1969 murders came in the day after the Manson family members slaughtered Sharon Tate and 4 others. The murder sent shockwaves through Los Angeles like never seen before. We're told Zach jumped when he heard the home was up for sale for $1.98 million. I saw a number of people predict this happening too. He literally ran to check out the house and made a close to asking offer. It'll close in early September. He was smart to jump because realtors tell us there were multiple backup offers. Really? Zach tells TMZ, as a collector of dark culture, he was drawn to the home's history. It was such a gruesome scene. After committing the murders, the family members showered at the home before leaving. That is really creepy. Zach says almost everything inside is original, and that's one of the main things that attracted him. The house is 1,600 square feet and has 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. Man, it's such a small house at $1.98 million. Really? Wow. It also has exposure to, it also has explosive city views. Zach won't say what he plans to do with the house, but says it's a storied house because of just the Manson murders. He says dogs have mysteriously disappeared from the property, and occupants have been freaked out over what he says is paranormal activity. Oh boy, we'll see. That's the next documentary. All right, let's move on. This next one's from Laudable. Let me make sure. My God, bless it, mouse. See, now it's doing it again. Ah, there it goes. I have to knock my mouse. I even put a fresh battery in this thing, man. Really. Oh, look at the little cute chihuahua. Well, this poor chihuahua. This is from Laudable. Birds can sometimes be absolute nightmares to deal with. I'm not a big fan. Whether you're trying to enjoy yourself at the beach, a stroll through the park, or just spending some time outdoors, birds can ruin your day nearly instantly. But spare a thought for a woman in the UK who is distraught after a seagull flew off with her pet dog. This poor little chihuahua. You're probably wondering how a seagull managed to make off with the dog, but you should know that it was a chihuahua. This is from Laudable, of course. That was stolen in the brazen daylight robbery. The 4-year-old pooch known as Gizmo was chilling in the Becca Hills backyard in Devon, England, when she saw a seagull swoop down and grab the dog with his beak and flew off. Speaking to Devon Live, the 24-year-old said that her and her partner are devastated. It carried Gizmo a fair way as we couldn't see him anymore. I have no idea if he was dropped or where he is now. Becca has issued an appeal on social media, hoping anyone will have information about where her beloved pet is. Please, 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 anyone finds a chihuahua, he's mine. A seagull took him from my garden. She begged on Facebook. That's so sad. I have a really upset 6-year-old missing her dog. Oh, man. So, a pet of a child, too. It's just awful. I hate birds.
Horrible.
Man.
Horrible.
I hate seagulls, too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you're a bird lover. I just don't like birds. I mean, they don't scare me like snakes or anything. I just think they're disgusting creatures half the time. I mean, some birds I like. I mean, I cute little birds, but seagulls, they're disgusting. I mean, I work at near a lake, Lake Michigan. And there's tons of seagulls, and people, of course, are idiots and leave their garbage out in the parking lot. And these seagulls come down I feel like I'm in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, the way these things come down. I can believe they took off a small dog. That's crazy. But let's move on. Next one. Let me see. Will this just let me scroll to the next one? No. Okay. No. It won't let me. Miss you, Rob. This next one's a video. Let me get it up here. Let me mute that for myself. You don't hear it. I don't know. A lot of people probably seen this. For the radio audience, this is a video, unexplained mystery. Video shows zombie meat crawling off a plate. Bizarre footage has emerged showing a piece of meat crawling off a restaurant plate onto the floor. Uploaded on Facebook 2 weeks ago by Rye Phillips. The video shows a piece of raw chicken seemingly taking on a mind of its own as it moves and gyrates in a rather unsettling manner. Let me play it again here. A woman can be heard screaming as the meat climbs off the plate and falls off the side of the table. It's unclear exactly where the footage was recorded, but it's been speculated that it is a restaurant serving Chinese, Japanese, or Korean cuisine. Tastes like chicken. Since appearing online, the video has reportedly managed to rack up over 4 million views and left some social media users scratching their heads or puking. One theory suggests that the meat is moving because the nerve endings are still active. That thing looks pretty dead. I don't think it should be active. I know my copy of it here isn't the greatest, but I think the other theory is they could have used a string to pull it. But it looks like it kind of flops around. It's really weird. Real weird.
I don't know about that.
But I'm not going to play the audio, but you hear her screaming, and I don't know if it's Japanese or I don't know, Chinese. I don't know, but you hear her. You hear that she's definitely freaked out. Oh, wow. I didn't want that. Okay, let's move on. Number 4. This is definitely gruesome. I don't have not this one, sorry, but this one's sad. This one's really sad and crazy. Remains, this is from Fox 59, remains found behind Iowa grocery store cooler ID'd as worker missing for 10 years. Council Bluffs, Iowa. Workers removing shelving and coolers from a former no-frills supermarket in Council Bluff, Iowa in January discovered a body behind one of them. The remains were recently identified as those of Larry Ellie Murillo Moncada, a former employee who had been reported missing since November 28, 2009. Investigators using his parents' DNA to confirm the identity, and the clothes matched the description of his attire at the time he was reported missing, according to the Council Bluffs Police Captain Todd Wedham. Murillo Moncada and parents reported their son missing after he became upset and ran out of their home. They told police at the time that he was acting irrationally, possibly because of medication he was taking. Officers contacted family members, other law enforcement agencies nearby, detention centers, and even the U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement Agency. He had been deported to Honduras before making his way back to the United States, but received no information regarding his possible whereabouts. Investigators now believe that Murillo Moncada went to the supermarket and climbed on top of the cooler. The space was used as a storage for merchandise, Wilden said, and employees would sometimes go there to hide when they wanted to take an unofficial break. Well, obviously, no employees ever did that again. Or, well, no, this is why. He is thought to have fallen into the 18-inch gap between the back of the cooler and the wall where he became trapped. Noises from the cooler's compressor may have concealed any attempts to call for help, according to Wyndham. An autopsy found no signs of trauma, and the case has been deemed accidental death. That is crazy. I mean, I can't imagine employees were going up there taking breaks, and his body's right behind that cooler. They didn't hear anything, or smell anything. You know, that's just crazy. I mean, that's sad too. It took them that long, and they found his body in January. It takes that long for the DNA test to come back too. Well, let's move on. Sorry, I needed coffee. It's been a long day. All right. Number 5 here comes from KTRE9. This one's the one that could, I don't have any other pictures. I didn't share any other pictures, but this one's just the idea of it. It's pretty graphic. FBI found buckets of heads, arms, legs, bodies sewn together at Arizona body donation facility, agents say. Phoenix, gruesome details have been released in a lawsuit against a body donation and tissue bank facility in Phoenix. The FBI raided Biological Resource Center as part of a human body parts trafficking investigation in 2014. Agents found buckets of full body parts and different people sewn together and hung up on the wall, according to testimony by one of the agents. This is a horror story. It's just unbelievable. The story is unbelievable, said Tori Harp, who gave the bodies of his mother and grandmother to the facility in 2012 and 2013. Harp, one of the more than 30 plaintiffs in the lawsuit against BRC, donated their bodies with the understanding that they would be used for scientific purposes. Cancer, leukemia, whatever else, using sample cells. That's what I was told, he said. But that's not what happened. In 2014, the FBI raided the facility in hazmat suits as part of a multi-state investigation into legal trafficking and sale of human body parts. I mean, that's a thing. I mean, sale of human body parts. Who's buying the body parts? For the first time, testimony for one of the FBI agents has conducted the raid has been released to the public. Agent said he found a cooler filled with male genitalia, a bucket of heads, arms and legs, infected heads, and a small woman's head sewn into a large male torso like Frankenstein hanging up on the wall, which is called a morbid joke in the lawsuit. Who in their right mind, Harper said, it's absolutely gross. The lawsuit says the bodies were cut up with chainsaws and bandsaws. Tools are these are tools that are not appropriate for dismembrating scientific bodies, Harp said. The lawsuit also says pools of human blood and bodily fluids were found on the floor in the freezer, and that there were bodies with no identification tags. He said his mother's ashes showed up by mail on his doorstep shortly after the raid, but he isn't even sure if they are her ashes. Yeah, I wouldn't be sure either. He said his mother and grandmother wanted to help medical research after their deaths. And I mean, my wife's grandparents, I know that's what they did. I mean, that's a horrible thought that they just, did this to these people's bodies. Why? I mean, why sew them together? Maybe there's a reason, but I don't know it. Why sew the body parts together? This is like Ed Gein's like field dream here or something. I don't know. But let's move on before we run out of time here. All right, number 6. Oop, going too far. Number 6, this is from sama.com. I see sama.tv.com. Karachi traders fearful after mysterious creature sighted in Sharash flea market, which is touted by, I don't know if I'm saying that right, sorry, which is touted by some as the biggest market of scrap goods in South Asia, has now been haunted, and now has its own haunted site. The sightings of mysterious out-of-this-world creatures at the market has sparked fear in many traders working there. The traders, as well, have started closing their shops early. It started 8 days ago when watchman Gulzar was performing his duties outside a warehouse. He heard dogs barking nearby and got up out of his chair to see what was going on. Gulzar said that he felt a strange sensation as he was walking towards the area where the noises were coming from. He then spotted a strange creature and ran away. The creature was black. Its eyes were as bright as a torchlight, he said. Gulzar has been working as a watchman for 25 years. I've never seen anything like it. And then there goes my article. Whoops. Hold on. He said he's never seen anything like it. Where was I? Gulzar shared the encounter with other watchmen, but no one believed him. But then the next day, another watchman, Abdul Qahim, was taken around of the area when he spotted the same creature. The two watchmen claimed that the creature was even killed 11 goats at the warehouse. Soon rumors started making the rounds, leading to fear and panic. Some have claimed that the mysterious figure is 5 feet tall, with others claim it can jump up to 20 feet. Not everyone believes the story, though. A person who works at the flea market said that he thinks someone is probably pulling a prank and there's no truth in the sightings. Some traders even approached the police, asking them to investigate the matter. A policeman said that they received many reports about sightings of such a figure, adding they are investigating the matter. Said 5 feet tall, dark, red glowing eyes. I don't know. Is he having a shadow person experience? Is what it kind of sounds like to me. It's just kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the description here. Hold on. So the strange creature ran away. The creature was black, and its eyes were as bright as red torchlights. Now, when I saw red eyes out of the one time out of my shadow person experience, they were faint. I wouldn't say they were bright red. I can see like bright light up the room, glowing red. That's what this sounds like. This could be like a 5 feet tall. I don't know. Or Mothman. I don't know. Might get into that tonight. Mothman with the whole maybe Mothman's related. I saw an article recently that said how Pazuzu Mothman was really Pazuzu. And then we're going to talk a lot tonight because that's what's on the front cover of Heather's book is Pazuzu, her inspiration for the story. We'll get into that tonight. All right, let's go on to the last one here. This last one happened 6 years ago in San Benito, Texas. It's a video here. Let me see if it'll let me play it here. Well, let me give you an idea before I play the video. The video comes from San Benito, Texas, located in the deep South Texas, along the Texas-Mexico border. The video was captured 6 years ago. This is from hold on. This is from darn it, I lost it. HorrorStoriesTexas.com. This video was captured 6 years ago. We spoke with a man named Ruben. He said him and his friend were fishing for some alligator gar. I don't know what that is. A small lake when they stumbled upon an unusual creature on the edge of the water. At first, they assumed it was just a dog. Suddenly, the creature stood up on its hind legs and appeared to resemble a hairy man. The fishermen react, and the creature darts way back in the bush. Now, this video is definitely not going to look good on mine, sharing it, and it's bad enough as it is. But we were talking about this with Linda Godfrey. There's not a lot. I mean, there are some Dogman videos and stuff, but it's not like Bigfoot. There's not as much stuff out there. So I thought this was interesting since we had that show a couple weeks ago, and this has been kind of viral lately. If my mouse would work, there we go. All right, let's play it. There's no audio here, but you just see this thing stand up right at the edge of the lake, and you can tell it's a cell phone footage. And then I have it replay again in slow-mo, but it's still not much better. It's really quick. And when they turn back, it's gone. I think I slowed it down here. You can see it. like stand up. You know, who to say that's not like some hunter in a suit? And then I got a still frame of it, which is just a blur. It's just a blur. But I mean, it looks like it could be a person, but I don't know. It definitely no way to tell if it's Dogman. That's what they called it, Dogman. They said they thought it was a dog laying on the ground or in the brush, and then it just popped its head up. I don't know. And I actually can go, I should check. I got my share screen here, but that's one thing. I can't share the comments when I'm not doing the World Wide Web of Weird because I can't see it. But this one's, I don't know. I mean, let's watch it again. I know people listening can't see it, but like I said, you see the scene on the shore. And it's really quick. It just goes by really quick. I don't know.
I don't know.
It definitely looks like it's brown, that brownish color they talk about sometimes, more like Bigfoot maybe than Dogman.
A bear?
The way it stands up like it's a person. It doesn't look like it's a bear. And it almost looks like it has a little head.
But bears will stand like that sometimes.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a sign of like aggression. I don't know, like stand up and yell at you and like stay away.
I mean, you see like the bears when they're doing stuff and they stand up to do things. Right?
Yeah. I don't know. It looks very human-like the way that it stands up, though. Like
it does move in human mannerisms. Let me see.
Now this is slowed down. Now this part. See the way it just lifts up. That's not how a bear would stand up.
Yeah.
You can see its shoulder. Bears don't have shoulders.
Yeah. I enlarged my screen. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, it's really crappy on my end. So definitely check this out at the you get it. It's on Coast to Coast as well. But this was originally from the horror stories of Texas.com. Dog-like human creature caught on camera. I don't know. Like I want to see some really good Dogman footage. Like all the ones that look good turned out to be pretty fake. You know, one didn't look so good. The one was like a stuffed coyote or something he put on the side of the road. It was awful. So there's just not a lot of Dogman footage out there. I want a good video, which might be impossible according to Linda Godfrey. I don't know. It stands up like a human. I think it could be a human in a suit of some kind. It might just from a distance look like weird, but it could be something I don't know. But that's it. That's it for the World Wide Web of Weird. I could have had one more story. I almost did one more story, but now I can't find it. Because I was like, some of these are going to go quick. I never know. It's hard. I always keep it to 7 stories, sometimes 8. But that's it for the World Wide Web of Weird. Let me get back to my StreamYard here. There we go. I can see the chat room. That's it, guys. But yes, I can show you your comments tonight. I will try to pay attention as I'm talking to Heather. This will be the first time I use it with a guest. Last week we did the ITC Collective Show, and we will be editing those videos. One video is up. Bill did that one. I got to work on editing those videos and get those out so you guys can see hopefully we got some replies. We definitely did in the one Bill did. It was just awesome replies. So keep an eye out. Follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on those postings, especially if you watched that night or called in for the ITC. And don't forget, if you listen to it and you hear anything, let me know. I want to know what you heard because I'm going to be editing this week. And if you heard something in your phone call, you called in the show, email me at, paranormalsoupjbland@gmail.com. Email me, let me know, or via me on Facebook, message me there. Let me know what you heard before I edit in, and I will try to find what you heard and see if I can tag it. That'd be great. And my mouse is going crazy, which is going to make this chat room thing really difficult tonight. Real difficult. Why? It's really difficult. Like, I got to get this mouse fixed. Or your chats are there's going to be like one comment left up there the whole time. Wow. I will shut this mouse down and restart it during the commercial break, but I can't even control my show. Wow, that is bad. There's my mouse. I need you. There's my mouse. Okay. Wow, that's bad. Hopefully we don't have any other technical difficulties. All right, but that's it. We're going to go to our commercial break. When we come back, we have our guest, Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demon Possession, Sinister Relics. It's been an awesome book. I'm enjoying it. I cannot wait to talk to her tonight, and we'll open up the phone lines later. All right, guys, we'll be back after this short commercial break.
He is conducting an experiment into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
This fall, a new hard-hitting police drama is coming to Friday night. He was a well-to-do cop transferred to a troubled precinct downtown. His new partner is a space traveler with a passion for justice. It's Yuppie and the Alien.
Look, you might vaporize dissidents in Alpha Centauri, but in this precinct, we do it by the book.
I'm so terribly sorry, Captain.
Googa, I'm sorry.
Don't miss this one-of-a-kind police drama. They're fighting crime the hard way in designer clothes with $250,000 sports car and a UFO.
Partner, let's go cruise in the car and look moody.
One tough downtown precinct, two outsiders doing things their way. Yuppie and the Alien on VBC.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world, a world of darkness. Nobody expected it. Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it. The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist. Warner Brothers presents William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin. The Exorcist, rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Bring life to the dead. 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 Enter the occult world of necromancy.
You were brought here for one purpose.
necromancy.
A ceremony dating back to the pre-Christian era. It's the art of reviving the dead. It requires involvement with evil spirits by the person performing the act.
The devil god brings life to the dead.
No, please. No, please.
And death to the living. Necromancy, starring Orson Welles and Pamela Franklin. From Cinerama releasing. In color, rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe. 5 by
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Dr. Heather Lynn. She's an author, historian, renegade archaeologist on a quest to uncover the truth behind ancient mysteries. Heather has explored the reaches of the unknown on a personal quest to find the truth about human origins. She broke away from the mainstream academia after realizing that much of what we know about our history is based solely on the consensus of elite, often politically motivated individuals and institutions. Now Heather is on a mission to expose our hidden history, challenging the accepted narrative found in our history books. While an undergraduate, she discovered the extent of how deep academic corruption could go. After earning her associate's degree in archaeology, she continued to study anthropology and history, earning her MA in history. Her thesis examined the intersections of class, inequality, consumer cultural propaganda, and public education in early modern Europe. She went on to pursue her doctorate in education at the University of New England. Her dissertation raises questions about the I'm probably going to get this wrong, Heather. Sorry. Pedagogical, I'll ask her that later. Value of digital technologies in museums. Way beyond my head, right? And then, of course, my article thing goes off. Okay. Becoming an ordained minister. Or wait, what the heck? Wow. Sorry about this. I totally butchered this intro because my tablet totally went dead on me. Here we go. All right. Consumer culture, propaganda, and public education in modern Europe. She went on to pursue her doctorate in education at the University of New England. Her dissertation raised questions about pedagogical value of digital technologies in museums. As a lifelong learner, she regularly participates in professional development courses and holds certificates in human Osteoarchaeology. See, I'm not an archaeologist. From Leiden University. After much soul searching, she turned down a traditional position in academia to venture down a more spiritual path, becoming an ordained minister and earning a doctorate in comparative religion. Heather is a member of professional organizations, including the American Historical Association, the Society of Historical Archaeology, Association of Ancient Historians, and the World Archaeological Congress. She is also the author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. I've been so excited to have her on the show, and I'm stumbling over her bio here. But I've been excited to have her on because when I was a kid, I was fascinated with ancient cultures. My fascination, of course, goes down the Ancient Aliens route, but I was thinking Ancient Aliens before there was an Ancient Aliens show. We might get into that tonight, but I love the idea of ancient archaeology. I was a big Indiana Jones fan, and I was also a big fan of The Exorcist, as much as it scared the heck out of me. If you remember that, what was the demon in that movie? Pazuzu. That's on the cover of her book, is this statue of Pazuzu, just to freak you out. We're going to get into that tonight. If you don't like the topic of demons and possessed items and possession and exorcisms, this might not be the show for you, but we have a lot of those, so hopefully you can hang in there. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. Are you there with me, Heather?
Yes, I am.
Is it all right to call you Heather or Dr. Lynn or?
Oh, Heather's fine.
Heather's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for totally butchering your bio. I'm having all kinds of technical problems tonight. My mouse is possessed by the demon Pazuzu, I think. And my phone is possessed. My mixing board's possessed. Like, everything's been really weird tonight. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it's because I got I got Pazuzu up on my screen and I got a book of Pazuzu here. I don't know. Just the image, is that bad? I don't know.
Maybe, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. No, you're fine. You did the very long intro. I wasn't expecting that. It sounds awfully pretentious, so I probably should like change that a little bit.
It isn't pretentious because you worked hard to get where you are in a field that I have a feeling it was very difficult to get into.
Well, not necessarily get into as much as it was probably stay in. You know, maybe that's what it was, at least for me. It was the quest to stay in that realm, especially once I started to notice all of the corruption and disenchantment in the whole field, and maybe seeing the writing on the wall that this the discipline isn't dying, but the method in which it's explored is a dying model. You know, I refer to it now as the academic industrial complex, and so
well, that's such a good way to put it.
It's a mess. So yeah, so it's you know, yeah, it was hard to stay in to an extent because it does take, you know, many years of just, you know, drudgery, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean, what made you want to get into archaeology in the first place?
Oh, you know, it's strange. I didn't realize I wanted to do it. I don't think. Strangely, I was a kid that loved the idea of exploration and archaeology and history, and I think probably movies, of course, did it to me. Indiana Jones and and the like. And there was I think back to this house that we had next door that had been torn down. For a while it looked haunted and spooky, and then they ended up just tearing it down, but they left a lot of the foundation and some of the, you know, rubble, and I used to go over there and play in it. And
so your parents' nightmare.
Absolutely. I was like stepping on broken glass. I was digging in, trying to find little pieces of things. I thought somehow I had it in my mind that surely this was a haunted house, and they tore the haunted house down, and if I were just to go through the foundation of it, I'd find evidence that it was haunted. So it's actually funny that I kind of never strayed from that whole maybe paranormal archaeology thing. But
you were already into it.
I was already into it, and I didn't realize it. So you know, I took a very untraditional path. I actually dropped out of high school when I was very young, too young, and I left home, ran away, had like a crazy adventure going across the country, and would not recommend. So, you know, be cool kids, stay in school. But, you know, I didn't. And then so when I was, you know, when I got my act together a little bit and I decided to go back, I went back to community college. And so my career was not handed to me like some people. You just get the nice 4-year ride, the parents pay for it. And then I really worked for everything. And so I started at community college in an, you know, an urban area in Cleveland. And, you know, just kind of worked my way into it. And eventually what I thought I was going to do was something just responsible, if you will, like business or, you know, and then I had to take all these electives, and I thought, well, I'm free to take what I want, thankfully. So I took the classes that I wanted to take, and I was so excited about that. And I just thought, you know, why am I taking this quote responsible route when it's not at all what I want to do? I don't want to do some bland thing. I want to do what I want to do. And so I started going into archaeology and working in archaeology and just kind of worked my way up from that. And strangely, I hated history in high school.
Really?
And I hated it. I hated it so much. I was a very good student, but I just had a lot of home troubles, and I just didn't stick it out. And so, you know, I thought I was going to be a musician. I played French horn in an orchestra. I still do. And, you know, I thought I'm going to be a musician one day or something like that. And I never thought of history. And I blame the educational system for that, because the way they teach history is through rote memorization and very boring
Bueller
things.
I had that one of those history teachers.
Exactly. And history is so cool. And I found that I loved history. I watched, you know, documentaries. I read about history on my own, and it just I never made the connection that, hey, wait, this is history. And I don't, you know, so it was just a funny thing. And college really opened me up to what history really was and what the study of it really was and the truth behind it. And it was very exciting. And I thought, well, you live once, so I'm doing what I want to do.
So I take it, though, like, because it seems like the archaeology world, universities are a kind of a secretive bunch, that they're not very open to the public. Like, I mean, the universities, the actual research, not museums and stuff like that, you know, where they have the public can go look around. Well, look at this. This is nice.
Well,
it's like to the actual, like, Like they know things about our history and all that, but they're not putting it out there. It's like between them.
You know, that's interesting you say that. That is exactly, in my opinion, correct. You will see a lot of outreach and, you know, articles published and things to that effect. But the way that knowledge is produced in a university is the production is one question. I should say the way knowledge is disseminated from the university, it is not easily accessed by the public.
Right.
So in order to get your hands on a journal article, something that was really cool that they discovered, you need to have university affiliation or a really good library. You need to somehow know what you're looking for and be able to get into these databases. And if you can't, well, then you have to pay a hefty fee to access the journals. And that's really a barrier to entry. And so that's one way that they sort of, you know, do what Michael Cremo calls is put up the knowledge filter, you know, and that's something that I really, it's
exactly like everybody
right.
should have access to this, especially when a lot of these things are government funded.
Yes. And, you know, I always thought it was the role of a professor or historian, somebody in that, position to share their knowledge because, one, they're a lot of times if they're working for a university that's publicly funded, they're in the public trust. And so that makes them a public servant. Two, you'd think they'd have a passion for it and they want to share and teach, or why else would you go into that? And I found that there was an article in the journal, it was the Chronicle of Higher Education. They had this whole debate going on about how historians are not for sale and we are not your servants. And they had this whole thing. They were likening it to being a doctor or a lawyer who, you know, they charge per hour for their knowledge. So why should you just give away knowledge for free? And I'm like, because it's the right thing to do, or maybe you got into the wrong discipline.
What was that? I don't know what that was. Maybe it's my mouse. I'm trying to fix my mouse. Remember I talked about my mouse? I'm putting different batteries in it.
Technical difficulties as well.
It is tonight.
That sounded like Cortana.
It did.
Windows.
See, Jamie? I should have shut that. I'm going to curse for the first time on my show. I should have shut that bitch down. We were looking at my task manager and I go, what's Cortana?
Cortana.
See, I'm like, I'll leave her alone. I'll leave her alone. And there she is.
Told you didn't need it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's interesting because, you know, there is this kind of, you know, debate going on where they have said now, especially since so many people are kind of wising up to this maybe more negative aspect to academia. Right. They've actually, you know, groups and conferences will advise historians especially to not answer emails from the public or even students unless they can verify that they are a student. They're afraid that if somebody, say, you know, Jane Doe emails a professor at a university and says, hey, I have a question, I'm doing research, or I found an artifact, can you explain it, or anything like that, that if you put yourself out there and you say, well, as a matter of fact, it's X, Y, and Z, you know, whatever, that what's going to happen is that person who contacted you is going to somehow use your words against you on like Twitter or just
the social media phobia.
Yeah, and so there's this extra now defensiveness to what they're doing, but I also think that's a little bit of a ruse, you know, because I think it's just another excuse for them not to want to engage with the average folk, you know, the
commoners,
serfs, the commoners, right, the pedestrians, and I think that's really what it is because they don't want to have to, I guess, engage with people, and it's really sad. And so what you have is this kind of thing going on over here. And now with museums, kind of worse in a lot of ways because museums are just, you know, funded by all sorts of crazy things. And talk about funding. That's another thing is if you're an active researcher at a university, at least in archaeology, there are many different money laundering schemes that happen. And, you know, I uncovered some of that in my initial report, The Sumerian Controversy.
Really?
Where big oil companies are actually funding excavations in the Middle East.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's part of the mystery, right? There's a lot of reasons potentially why. And you would think, well, it would probably be something logical. But when you really follow it up to where the money is coming from and you say, okay, it's not only big oil, but it is a global bankers, individual people. So one of the largest,
like collectors,
exactly. So the founding donor of that particular excavation that was near Ur, the Sumerian city was Baron Lorne von Thyssen of the Thyssen family dynasty, and he is heir to one of the richest families in the world, a Nazi banking family to be exact. That's how they made all their money. They used offshore banks.
That is so Indiana Jones. You got to admit that's so Indiana Jones.
It is totally Indiana Jones. They used offshore banks to pump money into the Nazi war machine, and they were the most important financiers to the Nazis. And so this guy who's heir to this, he has the world's largest collection of antiquities, except possibly the Queen. They're not real sure because there's some secrecy there. So they're in a little bit of a rivalry. Is it him or is it the Queen who has more of these antiquities? Yes. And so he decides, well, I'm going to fund all these excavations. Well, isn't that a bit of a conflict of interest? So, but to get to that, they make basically a foundation. That money goes to offer grants. That grant money goes to the university. That university puts it in department, heads. It just goes all the way down. So the actual archaeologists who are working, they really don't know all the details about who's funding this. But at the very top, when you get a site report and you have to give a complete report for what are your findings, what happens? Well, the anthropologist in charge, they don't go right to the university deans or anything like that. No, they go to the corporate heads in a closed door session at Gulf Sands Petroleum, and they give their PowerPoint presentation and their reports on to those people first, and then they make it public after. So what ends up happening is a huge gap in transparency, a lot of room for corruption. So you're telling me, in other words, that these people, hypothetically, they are so honest and transparent and distanced and unbiased that when they find the goods in Sumer, that they just give it right over to the universities to study they're going to take the best of the best and then give us the pot shards and the things that they already do.
Yeah, here's a nice little pottery here while we got the Ark of the Covenant in the box over there.
Exactly. And the funny thing is because these people are so out of touch, and I like to think of them as they've reached beyond Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for those familiar with that, where you have your basic needs met all the way up to your non-basic needs. You get to that point when you're at the top of that needs pyramid where you don't need anything, and at this point you're just getting crazy. But if you're rich, you're called
like Michael Jackson. You get a pet monkey in an oxygen chamber.
If you're poor, and you do this,
and Neverland
crazy.
Ranch,
Right, and this is that's a great example because that pretty much sums it up. And so if you're poor and you do these things, you're crazy. If you're rich and you do these things, you're eccentric.
Or Zach Baggins buying a Manson murder home just recently.
Oh my gosh.
$1.98 million for 1,600 square feet home.
Right. And so when the question is, well, then what are they looking for? Well, a reasonable person like perhaps you or I would say, well, maybe they're looking for, insert any reasonable explanation here. But what they are looking for are things like absolute crazy, like things like from an Indiana Jones movie, a Spear of Destiny or something that. That is what they're doing.
Well, that's what I wonder. Not to take you down the conspiracy road path here, Heather, but I'm about to.
I already do.
I bet. But you hear about like the New World Order and these Illuminati, and you hear that they worship like Babylonian religions, like these old ancient religions. Bohemian Grove, they got Moloch, the owl god or whatever, But it makes you wonder if that's what they're doing. They're like collecting for their private, this collection for for their secret Illuminati church or something,
Well, again, if you want to just fall down that rabbit hole, I
go all down it.
Oh, good, because I can say without a doubt that there is a lot of truth to that. Now, I've been contacted by people in Saudi Arabia, with like pictures saying, hey, can you tell me more about this artifact or this thing that I have? Like they're not necessarily looking for an appraisal, but they're wanting to know basically maybe interpretations or,
Does this open another doorway to hell?
Exactly. And what's funny is when you see some of these pictures that I've received, they will be the most beautiful cuneiform tablets set up in the most beautiful museum glass, sitting right in the middle of their living room behind like a there's a sectional couch and a huge television and some artifacts. It's like that's their reality. But the weird thing is, I've spoken to a lot of different people over the years who are involved in things and have these connections, And I really do think that this is true, that they believe. I don't believe that necessarily it's true that that these items have magical powers, or et cetera. But I believe that they believe that this is what they're doing. I think that they are very much motivated to find a host of things, like the tablet of destinies, rather, and the idea of stargates, and a lot of these ideas of
in India, the ancient how do I say it?
Vimanas.
Vimanas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Vimanas. We're talking like free energy and like UFO technology and stuff like that. You mean, if that, maybe there's, you talk about some of these big oil companies, maybe they got a real reason for making sure certain things don't get out. Like how they, in the ancient days, they were able to do things like and have free energy or something,
Oh yeah. And so that, I do believe that is what they're looking for. And so that sounds absolutely bonkers if I say that, but it's not
to me, but
it's one of those things. Well, it's one of those things where it's easy maybe for somebody to go, oh, of course not. They're sensible people. I mean, they wear suits, right? It's easy to look at the exterior of these people and think that they're, somehow positioned in, in a more rational or respectable way, but it's ruling by theater. It's not necessarily indicative of the type of rationale they have. And so when they have money and power and eccentric thoughts and no one to stop them, they're running amok, and they're using the universities and museums and all sorts of things to do this. And so that's sort of what I get into in some of my work, when I'm not looking at maybe the more, I dare call it fun aspects of history, because I think it's gruesome, evil archaeology and whatnot. But I do look at the conspiracy aspects of this, because in my experience, it's actually true. There's a lot more there with the idea of cover-ups, and there's a lot of reasons. It's a very nuanced and multifaceted, reason that they do this. It's compartmentalized. So the higher ups, they hide it for one reason, and all the way down, they all have their own reason.
Sounds just like UFO technology. I'm just saying this is the same way it works.
Yeah, and then you have the problem of what's called gray material, and that is something that's becoming more and more problematic in archaeology, where you have private corporations that are basically doing the work of archaeologists. They're cultural resource management firms, and what the problem is with them, even though they do everything by the books and whatnot, they're hired for say government jobs. So if you are going to go dig a new highway system, you have to legally have an archaeologist there to see if there's anything that you're disrupting, like Indian burial grounds or Native American burial grounds, rather, that sort of thing. So obviously nobody wants to find that, because then that makes the project slow down or even stop.
Right.
So they encourage those archaeologists to go in and just hustle, get out, and don't stop our, So
maybe take some money under the table. Like, I see no bodies here.
Yeah, that happens too. And so you get those people. Now, what happens with that situation is they're not in the public trust, because they're being contracted.
Right.
And so they're a private company. And so when they make their reports or whatever they find, where does that information go? Well, it's called gray material generally, because it's thought that they kind of go put it in a gray file cabinet, lock it away, and no one sees it ever again, because it just sits there. Not accessible to researchers, not made public. And so there's a huge gap in knowledge all over the place. Now, I know of some, people who run these sorts of companies that are very good, and they hold field schools and they do their best to do a good job, but it's just not a universal thing. And so there's so many things at play here where, there's corruption abound everywhere. And so
that's so sad, because when I was a kid, I grew up in a very open household, and my mom and dad basically left me, there's no dogma in my house, I would say. And so I read all kinds of things. One of the books when I was really young I read was Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. Mm-hmm. I think it was still in grade school when I found my mom's copy of it and read it, and it just brought up so much. Like, well, I mean, of course he's not an archaeologist, and of course people rip ancient aliens apart. They get a lot of things wrong. They do, but I love the show. You know why? Because they're asking the questions I feel like academia has never been asking about the big gaps in their story.
Mm-hmm.
I
agree 100%, and I gotta say, this has been, I kind of went into this myself for reasons like maybe Von Daniken or whatever. As a kid, I used to really love the show Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, yeah.
All those sightings and that kind of thing. And I was that kid, that dorky kid that went to the library and got all those like Time Life, Mysteries of the Unknown books that had all the,
like the gray, had the gray panel, like it was like a gray thing. It had the like gray alien on one of the pictures, and there's series of books. Yes, I had those.
Yes, I love those.
Me too. I still have them.
Things, me too. I do too. I love those, and I love those, and that was something that I really was excited about as a kid. And I still think it's very innocent and it's very good. Now, the problem is lately, people are not, I'm sure they're not really open to not only free speech, but now free thought.
Right.
And so there was an article written not too long ago, maybe 2 months ago at this point, that was published widely all over social media, and it was on, I think, sciencemag.org, or something like that. I don't know. I had the link on my blog, but it was written by an archaeologist that, they were basically saying that this sort of inquiry into ancient mysteries is white supremacy.
What?
And that it's racist.
How is that? Seriously, has that where we've gone to now? Really?
Well, Bigfoot's racist, and Loch Ness Monster is white supremacy, and you better not talk about that stuff, or else you are basically an awful person.
Heather, can you do me a favor after the show? Can you send me the link to the jerk that wrote that, please?
Oh yeah, and it is absolutely, it is.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just blew my mind with that.
It is. It's rightfully so. I mean, you really should read this article and just really, it's almost unbelievable. Well, it shows. I think the article was called "Believe in Atlantis." These archaeologists want to win you back, or win you back to science. But they basically went on to discuss all the things that Atlantis and whatever, and pyramids, and they kind of went over it, and instead of doing the whole like scoffing, like, oh, these people believe that aliens built the pyramids, they said, no, these outlandish beliefs that have been circulating for decades, they say archaeologists have widely ignored them, but now we can't. And so they go on. Yeah, it's really weird, because then I found out they had a conference about this.
What?
And I think it was Texas. And they said, we have to figure out a new method here and figure out how to address this problem. Then they interviewed this a person I will not name, because I will not give him at all any kind of airtime, but somebody who writes for a blog, and he's like this debunker and whatever. And so he says, he claims, and by the way, this guy has hardly any credentials, yet he always wants to come down on everybody. And I'm not, one to say, oh, I'm going to up your credentials and all that.
Welcome to the internet, Heather.
I know, and I don't even believe that matters. I think that, armchair historians can know sometimes more than regular historians. So,
no, true.
But the point is, this guy, man, he's just something else. And so he says, well, this whole movement towards ancient mysteries and this kind of paranormal subject matter has a real dangerous dark side. And it basically claims, the claims assume that the ancient non-European societies were like Egyptians or what have you, were not capable of inventing sophisticated architecture and that. And so it's racist at its core, he says. And so
I've heard that before. That, it's racist towards the Egyptian people.
And that I can see where the people are saying that. And so that's one thing. And I'm not even saying I'm going to agree or disagree or what have you. It's just like we go from one opinion to
nuts, to
actually saying they have to, find a way to deal with this. And the thing is, I think why this is the way that it is that they themselves have created a vacuum.
That's exactly it.
So when you don't reach out to the public, well, the public has a need to know, and they're going to look and find ways to figure out what's going on. And so they're the ones at fault for not doing a better job reaching out to people. And I had this experience when I was in school, and I was, working for this archaeology lab, and it was the summer, and they said, hey, we're doing like archaeology day at the museum to encourage people, to come and take this class that we're having on intro to archaeology. Can you make some print collateral and, to hype this up? And I was like, sure. And so I made some flyer that had a spooky skull on it, and I don't know, it was just silly, but I made it really cool and spooky looking and fun. Well, I got it printed, I got all these things printed. I set them out there. It was just boom, 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 hurry. So they didn't get approved. Well, afterwards, I was told, you might want to rethink this strategy. Don't ever do this again. And here's why. we don't like to sensationalize the field, because then it's just going to attract all these Indiana Jones people. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is anthropology 101, literally. That's who you will get. And there's nothing wrong with that, because
right. What's wrong with excitement about something?
Just get them in, and then get them going. And then you'll find that, you know, it is exciting and you can learn things. And if that's your gateway drug into like real academia, you'd think they'd be all on that.
Oh no, they've been huffing Indiana Jones again.
Exactly, right? You know, snorting that Indy. So they went in there and said this very thing in this article, which is that, you know, these people, you know, are all racist and horrible, and that this needs to stop, and we can't do this anymore. We're gonna have to call it out. And what was funny and probably ironic was the person who wrote the article said that, well, when they were 18, they read a book about ancient civilizations that vanished and probably made the Egyptian pyramids. That was his inspiration, or I'm sorry, her inspiration, to take an archaeology course in college. I'm like, well, then wait a minute. But that's my whole argument, is that
right.
As a child,
so it got me interested in it.
Exactly. And so what's the harm in that? And so when you get older and you need a little more to, you know, think about, as opposed to just, okay, we've seen the picture of Stonehenge 100 times and, you know, the Patterson footage or Loch Ness Monster. We've done this enough. Now let's dig a little deeper, because we're adults and we have more complex minds. And so we want to look further into it. And there's kind of a vacuum. And so thankfully there's alternative researchers who, you know, kind of fill that void. But of course, that comes with its own set of problems. But it doesn't matter, because that's what they've left us with. That's what they've left us all with.
That's what I've always said to people, all the credits to Eric von Daniken for Chariots of Gods, which is, I still have that hardback original book my mom, you know, had. I took it from her. Sorry, Mom. But he's had all these credits over these years. But I'm like, you know what? That guy asked the questions that none of you jerks asked. Right. You know, and you should have been asking. Maybe he's got stuff wrong, but why don't you get out there and explain it then? Because I got those questions.
And all good discoveries are made by accident anyway, and they're made by accident because somebody's bold and creative and daring enough to get out there and put their neck on the line and say something crazy. You know, you go out there and say something and say, maybe it's this, that, or the other, and maybe it's not, but you might find out something completely different because you're not stuck in that status quo line of thinking. And so my whole idea about this was that alternative theories are kind of like mushrooms in the forest of human understanding. So mushrooms are like, I know, it's like, follow me with this crazy one here. It's like the mushrooms, you know, there can be deadly poisonous mushrooms. There can be some that are just benign and some that are totally psychedelic mind expansion vehicles. And so what do? To handle the toxic ones, do we just destroy all mushrooms? If you do that, of course, you're going to destroy the symbiotic ecosystem of the forest. So what do? Do we ban people from the forest of ideas? That puts limits on our freedoms individually. And so I always say just the best way to deal with these dangerous mushrooms is to teach people the necessary skills to identify which ones are good, bad, or neutral. And by genuinely educating people and allowing them the freedom to apply this knowledge, you know, you're doing a good deed. And I think that's the moral duty of educators. And trust people that they can, you know, once you give them those tools, set them loose in that forest and let them see what happens. And
well, it just seems like the whole academia and the what we've accepted as a history is just been stagnant. And with all these huge gaps, in my opinion, I mean, they're still the missing link, in my opinion. They haven't totally explained evolution, in my my assumption of what I've read and seen. I'm not an anthropologist or a scientist, but I just see these huge gaps, and especially with the pyramids. I was watching Ancient Aliens the other night. Of course, me and my wife go to sleep to it like every night. We got like the seasons bought on Amazon Prime, and I was watching it. I don't remember what episode it was, all about the pyramids and the Sphinx, and with a famous archaeologist for Egypt.
Zahi
Hawass, yes, was there, and you know how he feels about the ancient aliens.
Yes.
And so when I see him pop up in this episode, I'm like, oh boy, you know, because he's like, you know, at least he came on the show, you know, but he's like explaining why, you know, there's nothing under the Sphinx, and it's like, dude, people are gonna keep coming with these questions because you guys just leave it stagnant. That it's this, that it's like you don't want to explore any further.
Right. And I think that there's really, it's just my view that there's really nothing wrong with people being interested, asking questions. And if you are somebody who you feel that you have legitimate answers to those questions, offer those answers and just have a discussion, open a dialogue. And I believe that most people are more reasonable and rational than, academics and people in charge give them credit. And so that was where I had a problem. That and many problems when I was in school. I just noticed that they were grooming me to be an elitist, and by nature I was not. I was that person that said,
renegade
I'm out
archaeologist.
of here. Kind of, yeah, exactly. So
but we need more of you. We need more of you. I honestly think we need more educated people like yourself that go against this, that go against the fray and look to these questions, But one, we're going to talk about your book. Let's talk about your book. What got you to write about evil archaeology in itself, like about the dark side? I understand your background of interest in the weird and the unusual, but what really prompts you to write evil archaeology?
It started off actually kind of silly in a way, because I have been doing a lot of research over the years in ancient Mesopotamian history and religion and belief systems, and I deal a lot with the idea of the Anunnaki and those beings. And so, in my research, I find that there's a very unique relationship between sort of the underworld and their idea of demons and what we think of now as evil spirits or demons, and cross culturally. So not just Christianity, but also jinn and many other pagan deities. And so that stuck out to me, and it was fascinating. And then I happened to be watching The Exorcist. I was brought up Catholic, and so I was told, no, you can't watch The Exorcist, although, of course, then we turned around and watched The Exorcist. Yeah. Absolutely. So saw it probably way younger than I should have seen it, and so it really is, frightening to me. So that stuck with me, but I hadn't seen it in many years, and it just happened to be on, and I for the first time, it dawned on me when I saw the opening scene, with the
in Iran.
It opens up in an archaeological excavation. It's in Iraq, and
it's in Iraq. Sorry,
yeah, and so that was the site of close to Ur and all the places that all these demons, the Anunnaki, and all these beings sort of. That's where they originated. So we're talking many thousands of years ago, and it was just kind of a weird thing to me. I hadn't noticed that before because I hadn't seen the movie in that long. And so a lot of people are interested in, Egyptology, and Egyptomania was a thing that just has swept the nation and the world actually for many years, but not so much is known or maybe thought of in terms of the Sumerian culture. And so lately, though, people have been more excited about that. So it just really, I guess, stuck with me. And I thought, well, isn't that fascinating that, here is this older movie, and it starts with this demon Pazuzu. The demon Pazuzu was the one that would end up possessing the main character in both the book and the movie. And, so that stuck out to me, and I was a little bit curious about that, but it kind of stopped there. And it wasn't even long after that I had heard a news story coming out of North Carolina, where they had discovered the remains of two men who had been missing since 2009. And, and so it was just, unfortunately, it sounded like a run-of-the-mill, crime story until I heard who did it, and they said Pazuzu. And I had remembered then the name, and it was always sort of like maybe synchronicity. I listened, and I double take, and I find out that this was a man named Pazuzu Algarad, who had legally changed his name from John Lawson to this demon. And so he, according to his psychiatric report, he said that he had practiced a Sumerian religion that involved a monthly blood sacrifice of, typically a small animal. And he had to perform the ritual during what he called the Black Moon in order to appease the Sumerian demons and honor this Pazuzu. And first off, I'm like, well, that's really not a Sumerian religion. That's not a religious practice, and there wasn't really a Sumerian religion in that way. So, he's sort of making a lot of this up, or I guess feeling his way through it. And then that really just stuck out in my mind, and I thought, how interesting is it that this demon from so long ago, a demon that it was accused of possessing people, and in some ways inspiring them to do something, is doing the same thing now in modernity. That, and so I started thinking about the criteria of what it means to be possessed. So we have these ideas like The Exorcist, where this demon is in you and it takes you over on a biological level, and you take on an appearance of a demon as well. And all of these.
I don't have his picture. I have the video of the when they went through his house. Actually, I'll have that playing while we're talking about it. But
oh yeah, that's absolutely great.
But yeah, we covered it on our World Wide Web of Weird years ago. It was 2014.
Yeah.
When this happened, I think we picked it up after the court case went through. But yeah, I'm showing the video.
Oh, that's fascinating, because a lot of people didn't cover that. I was surprised, but so yeah, that's really great that you covered that, because it's really bizarre, to say the least. But yes, I kind of detail that house tour in the book, because when I found that, I thought, wow. And I'm looking for those details, like, what is it? Are these just general sort of symbols that are being shown, or is there something more to this? And it was just it's crazy insight into the dark, mind of somebody.
Did he actually have a grasp of this? What is it? What is Pazuzu? Mesopotamian or Sumerian? Yeah, Mesopotamian, yes, right?
Well, Sumerian is Mesopotamian. It's sort of like the region. Yes. Right. So the land between two rivers is,
Did he have a grasp of that religion? I mean, was he?
No, he did not. He clearly did not. And that's one of the things that stuck out to me and got me digging into researching this a little more. He was like clearly, crazy and 100% responsible for his terrible acts of not only, killing his neighbors, but cannibalizing them.
Eating them, yes.
Eating them. And doing these things in the name of Pazuzu, and getting his girlfriend to help and another friend to
actually the shot right here it comes to. I know you can't see it, but it goes into this room that's filled with garbage, and there's a poster of Pazuzu on the wall. You see?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I've watched the video many times. I've inspected it frame by frame, looking for some of those other details that might speak to what could have been in his mind and that sort of thing. And so. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because it really does bring that to light. If you could, too, I'll send you a link to that article. If you could send me a link to that, where you found that, because where I had it before, it had been taken down. So I had been unable
I found
to
the
find
video.
it easily.
You know what? I'll have to go back and see if they still have that article up. I save all my World Wide Webs of Weird, so I'll have to see if I can find it. That's a long time ago. If I still have it, I'll have to check.
So I thought about the idea of possession, and then I thought about the idea of inspiration, and the Latin. Inspirare meant to breathe or blow into, and that was a word used originally to describe specifically when a supernatural being were to impart an idea to somebody.
Right.
And so that's where we get the word inspiration. And I thought, well, what is possession in a way but an evil spiritual entity inhabiting a willing person and getting them to do these evil things in the name of that demon? And, maybe it's not just this idea, of course, that people generally have where the demon jumps into your body and violently forces you to do things, but could it be as simple as inspiration, which actually isn't a simple thought. It's, now it's simplified, but the idea of inspiration is sort of ambiguous and interesting in and of itself. And so I think that's really what spurred me to look a little deeper into the connections between, what we believe in a contemporary period about possessions and things inhabiting, whether they be places or things or people, and what they thought a long time ago. What is the connection here, and just some of the questions that came up with that inquiry, like why wings? Why are these winged creatures? Why do they look the way they do? Why is it that the demons that we know today, when somebody were to say demons, the archetypal figure of a cloven hooved half goat, half, man kind of satyr. Why is that the devil? Why does he hold a pitchfork? Where are we getting all these ideas? Is there anything to it? What is the origin of these demons?
Well, there's something to it for him. If I remember right, he died in prison, like horribly, mysteriously. Like, I don't remember the details of it, but I remember he died in prison. I don't know if he was stabbed or I don't remember. I think
they don't know either. And that was the thing that was actually really crazy. So yeah, he was put into jail. He was awaiting trial, and it was like 3 a.m. The guards found him in a pool of his own blood in his cell. And the autopsy report showed he had cut his left arm on the inside very deep on the inside of his elbow, like he was trying to cut off his arm.
Oh my
and
God.
So the report said he had perforated his left brachial artery, and that led him to just bleed out. But he had other deep scratches on his chest and arm and head, and rib fractures. But the autopsy couldn't definitively determine how he got the wound that ultimately killed him. And so it's still a mystery, but they just ruled it suicide. But before
Nothing to see here,
that,
people.
right? Oh, it was crazier. Yeah, it was before that. He had begged the psychiatrist to let him perform his so-called black moon ritual to Pazuzu.
Wow.
He said that if he didn't do it, the demon would be angry and hurt him. And even his mother begged the police to hear him out and was very worried about her son, because she said if he wasn't able to perform his dark moon ritual, then he could likely kill himself. And so, we don't know what happened. It's kind of left to, I suppose.
His mother was
himself,
a
right?
Satanist too, I think, though. Like the whole family was messed up.
It was, it's pretty wild. And so it ended before there was even justice, really. But and so it does leave you to wonder, like, what was going on here, and what would make somebody do this. I mean, yes, there's mental illness, and that's something I go into in the book as well. I look at that idea of, what are some of these diseases people have suffered, and what have that they have been accused. They've been accused of having a
like
a
epilepsy.
demon in them, epilepsy in particular. Yes, but I trace this sort of idea all the way from, say, the Neolithic period, or actually earlier, because I start the book discussing prehistoric attempts at exorcism. Or at least presumed attempts. Yeah, I know a lot, and that's something I guess I should put out there too. The book is a little gory, but it's not done in a way that is, to it be gratuitous or
it has a point. It has a point.
Yes, but it is kind of gory. Yeah. So, I don't know. Did I lose you?
No, you're here. Sorry.
Okay, I heard a noise.
That was a notification. Sorry. Usually I have those shut off, but my computer's being weird tonight. It's got a mind of its own.
Maybe it's possessed.
Sorry to interrupt your thought on that.
It's possessed.
Yeah. But, how demons itself, before the Abraham religions, I mean, demons go back all the way back to the earliest history of man. That's what you show in these early, Sumerian exorcism rituals.
Right. And I also argue that before that, with that more gory explanation of the idea of trepanning or drilling a hole in your head, that it was done in an effort to release demonic spirits from the head. And some people have argued, some historians have argued that, the cave drawings of these half man, half beasts are actually drawings of demon-like figures. And some people say, oh, they're ritualistic. They're these nice romantic characters of, like sorcerers or hunting magic. But others have discussed that those are potentially demons on the wall. And so it's hard to prove that. But yes, going on into as far back as we have written record, that would be the Sumerian, culture. And what's fascinating there is because they were such prolific writers in keeping these records of everything they did. We have very detailed accounts of how they performed exorcism. And so these come from a collection that is in the British Museum of about 1,000 cuneiform tablets that were medical textbooks, because the way they had their society structured was actually quite advanced. You don't think of the ancient people going back 4,000 years as having such advanced systems and hierarchical systems, but they did. They had medical school. And so they would go to a medical school and learn all these things from textbooks. And thankfully, they had so many of these that, we have them now. And so out of the 1,000 medical textbooks held at the British Museum, 660 of them specifically reference exorcism.
Wow. So they took it seriously.
They did, and it was part of this idea that it was a medical necessity. And so they didn't have that kind of mind-body disconnect that we do now. They thought it was all the same thing. And so one method that they use, now a lot of the methods they use are strikingly similar to the methods depicted in popular culture that are popularized by not only movies and things, but from the actual Catholic rites of exorcism, that idea of like, demon, tell me your name, and all those different things. Or holy water.
Knowing their name was important to them, like it is to the exorcist now.
It was essential because in this context that they lived in, this idea that they were performing a medical act, the doctor or the priest at the time, the priest would come to the patient's house, and the patient would be exhibiting symptoms. So maybe they'd be vomiting, or they'd have a fever, or they would be acting irrational or something. And they would say, okay, let's take note of these symptoms. Well, if you're showing all these signs and symptoms, it could very well be that you are like infected or possessed with this demon. And this demon, so in a way, it was like anthropomorphizing or somehow putting together, a diagnosis, but using it in a way that made it a real kind of being. So it's like calling it the demon of cancer or the demon of, the common cold. But it was important for them to do that and to demand that the demon presents itself. They present the symptoms, the demon would need to present itself, and that way you'd know exactly what treatment you'd give. And that treatment would vary for each demon, because each demon had their own thing they liked. And so it would be medicines, even things like pills and capsules. They had those back then. They would have salves or different, almost like a Vicks vapor rub. They put salves on the chest, you'd breathe in the vapors. And, so they did these things. And then they would mix it up with all these other weird kind of religious seeming rituals, because they didn't, separate the idea of mind and body. And so one method they did that was very, I guess, funny as much as interesting, was that they took modeling clay figures to this whole new level. They got clay and they modeled the figures of demons so that they could have them do battle.
I remember this from the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like, in the book, I call it a primitive game of Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Right.
Because it was almost like, could you imagine these very respectable priest, doctor, people coming down from the tops of these ziggurats, and they would say, okay, now what we're going to do is you're going to have your clay model, I'll have mine, and we're going to duke it out and fight them.
Show me on the clay model where the demon hurt you. That's what I'm thinking.
Right. So the priest would instruct the patient to make a figurine of the demon, and the patient would have to raise his hand and sort of chant something. He would say, that unknown ghost, I have made a figurine of him. And then the priest would purify a little clay pit, and he'd do that by putting wheat flour into it and then waiting. And then the next morning he would go back and say, I will buy clay from the potter's pit for a representation of evil. He would instruct the patient then to take that clay and make figures of a male and female witch, which is sort of like a weird translation, but it's unclear as to what they actually meant by making a male and female witch, other than it was proposed to me that they could have been some sort of puppets used in sympathetic magic rituals, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And so the patient would then present those figures and then pray that the demon takes the clay figure as a substitute. There's a whole crazy kind of thing, and they would use these clay figures as scapegoats. And so you'd have to mix the clay. Now, it wouldn't just be clay, it had to be special clay. So you'd mix it, and then you'd put tallow and wax with it and chant over it 3 times. Like myself, his flesh is like the appearance of my flesh. I've mixed clay from the pure mountains, tallow and wax. I have made a representation of him. So then,
reminds me of a golem. Sorry, that's what I was thinking.
Well, exactly, but that is very similar. And in a way, some of these chants that they would say, and this is so silly, and I'm just gonna say I put it out there. It's silly. I like horror movies, and so this reminded me when I read this of Child's Play, the original. Not
oh yeah.
Child's Play.
Well, the actual possessed doll. Okay.
Yeah. And so, saying these crazy chants over it and having so it's like they kind of had this line of thinking even then, but they were doing it in maybe obviously a different way, but like taking it very seriously. But at that point, so you'd have these clay figures, and you would pose the figures, and then you could feed it, and you would demand that they eat. You say, eat this. You're my substitute. Drink. So you're very kind of like rude to your little figurines and like demand a lot from them. And then one command you'd say is, little dwarf, you have completely fitted out as my substitute. And, little dwarf is, I think very insulting, especially nowadays, because that's not PC at all. But, so you'd say, little dwarf. And so, the spirit then would enter the clay figurine. At least you hoped or believed it did. At that point, that's when you'd get the clay figure of the adversarial demon in place. And so that's the thing they did a lot of, is they had, the demons were like a pantheon of neutral figures. And a lot of them were very evil, but they also had like positive attributes. And so what you'd do is you'd say, for instance, with the case of Pazuzu, total bad guy, you wouldn't want him around unless you were a pregnant woman, in which case you'd really want to be wearing a figurine of Pazuzu around your neck, or even have a plaque, because he protected you against the demon of miscarriage and stillborns and
Lamashtu. Was that
Lamashtu? Yes. Yeah. And the reason he was able to do that and have power over that demon is because that demon was his wife. And his wife, in that kind of storyline, was she couldn't have children of her own, and so she would go and steal babies and make women have miscarriages or have sudden infant death happen, and so he would go and literally take a whip and whip her into place in submission and say,
not
"Oh
PC
no,
now.
not PC now, no." So he was like the terrible demon, patriarchy there. He's like whipping his wife into submission and doing these terrible things to her. But that would stop her then from killing the child. And that's what you'd want, which is why Pazuzu, strangely, for as awful as he seems to be now, he was one of the most popular demons of the time, which is why we have so many figurines of him left, because so many women wanted Pazuzu figurines to protect, their babies.
We have to go to commercial break. But when we get back from commercial break, we can talk about how, demons weren't all, before Christian times, demons were good and bad. People used them for good and bad purposes. That's what I always find, the Christendom came down and made all these pagan gods, everybody demons. But back before Christianity, you could use a demon to get something done for you, maybe at a cost. But,
exactly.
But we'll come back. We'll talk about that with our guest, Dr. Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. And then we'll open up the phone lines and you can call in. I'll give those phone numbers out after the commercial break. We'll be right back.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all, but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
Knights of the road, here's your stallion. The car for freedom. The car for hot excitement. The car for a man who is alone against the elements.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
The pride is back. It's the power of a compact.
Looks small, but it's so big.
Fuel injected.
Inject me.
My Vatsu Thunder. On the toll road of life, you have to pay to prove you can. Live the emotion of an individual.
Thunder.
The awesome power of nature distilled into one vehicle.
Wow.
Because after you get struck by lightning, there's thunder.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
Tired of school?
Who is Joan of Arc?
Noah's wife? Like to travel?
Let's go back into history. Let's reach out and touch them.
Want to meet people in the past?
Put them in the Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden? Excellent! Execute them, Otis.
Then hitch a ride with George Carlin, Keanu Reeves, and Alex Winter in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from Orion Pictures.
Hi, Jill. What are you making?
I'm making average noodles for my kids.
What are they like?
They're distinctly average. This one is broccoli flavour.
That is very average. I could barely raise any extreme enthusiasm for those whatsoever.
You should try their other flavours like carrot, plain fish and potato.
Are they quick to prepare?
Compared to other noodles, you mean?
Yes.
They're pretty average, actually.
Well, I might just possibly go and maybe buy some sometime, in a bit perhaps.
Yes, I'm sure your whole family will be mildly interested in average noodles.
Average noodles, they're okay, just nothing special.
Hi, Jill! What are you making?
I'm making super noodles.
For your kids?
Stuff that. For me.
What flavour are they?
They're magnificent mild curry. Oh, they are super. Wait till you try their other flavours, like sudden fried chicken, barbecue beef, and cheese and ham.
Wow, Jill, this has changed my life. Now I really appreciate the meaning of the word super as an adjective. Mummy, come here, Sam.
Yes! In fact, I'd invite the whole state round for tea. Yeah!
Bachelor super noodles, not named super for nothing.
The first time was only a warning. Damien, Omen 2. Now showing at the Leicester Square Theatre. Certificate X. Available in paperback from Futura Books.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. And I got to mention there, that was one of my favorite monologues from the movie Blade Runner. And Rutger Hauer passed away this week. I was so sad to hear that. It's one of my all-time favorite movies, one of my favorite villains in a movie. And yeah, really sad to hear his passing. Sorry to get off track, but I had to say it. I had to play that tonight because I played it on the show a lot, but I had to play that clip tonight because it's really sad he's lost. But our guest is Dr. Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. We're talking about the past. How far do demons and demons' possessions go back? Well, back to our earliest writings. Demons seem to be with us always. And of course, it's a subject we've covered the last 4 years on the show quite a bit. And even in her book, she includes information from Bill Bean, who we've had on the show. We're going to have on again, an exorcist. There's a lot of good stuff. I highly recommend this book. If anybody has an interest in demons or in history, archaeology, and into the past, this is a book for you. I highly recommend it. It's so interesting. There's so many different stories. It's hard for me I'm trying to direct the show to where I want to get to, but I don't know. There's so many things I want to cover. So there's a lot to get into, but you can call in tonight and ask questions of our guest. The phone lines are open. There are two ways to call in tonight. There's the 219-230-4444 line. That's 219-230-4444 or Skype ID OOJ Bland OO. That's OOJBLANDOO. Call in and ask a question of our guest. But let's go ahead and get rolling back into the show. You still there with me, Heather?
Absolutely.
I'm still battling with my mouse. It's hard during the different show breaks when your mouse suddenly it works and then it doesn't want to work.
That's
It's driving me nuts. So if I lose attention, that's because I'm battling a mouse. I even put another new battery in it just to make sure that wasn't it, and that wasn't it. Anyways, enough of my mouse. We were getting in. I always found it fascinating with the difference between we all think of demons, evil, the exorcism, but back in before Christianity, people used demons for good and bad.
Absolutely, yeah. That is something that is pretty common in most religions and belief sets. It's this idea that these figures, these entities, were somehow otherworldly, and they were almost human in a way, in the sense that they were both good and bad, yet they just had a lot of power and supernatural capability. And so it's not until much later that the demons are literally demonized, that these entities or nature spirits in some cases, like the case with Pan.
Yeah, I was going to say Pan's one.
Yeah, Pan is a great example, because Pan is the model for the devil, the idea of a red devil, that cloven-hooved horn type entity. And so, Pan, it was a very fun-loving nature spirit. It had alcohol and sex, and basically sex, drugs, and rock and roll of
the rock star of deities.
The rock star of deities, and he was very much loved because of that. He represented just kind of a good old time, and that was very much anti-Christian in a lot of ways. And so, they use this idea of Pan as a sort of warning against what could happen to you if you went down that road. And so a lot of things happened, and they basically went on a spree of saying, we're going to make all of these folk heroes or spirits or any of these things basically scary, and they lumped all the beliefs and cultural fears into sort of a cauldron of just beasts and evil and magic and monsters. And I think that's really interesting when you take a look at the common thread that these ancient beings, these ancient depictions of demons have, which is that they're both animal and man put together. And that's something, you see it with Pazuzu having kind of a cat paws and wings and this sort of thing. But you see this across different cultures, that there's animal-human hybrids, and those are somehow scary and awful. And, some people will argue, well, that was the extent, that was the limit of the human imagination at the time, because they, could only see animals around them, and they couldn't really imagine other things. And, that's one way to look at it, I suppose. But another way is this idea that, in Christianity especially, the Bible makes a large point of saying that God made man in the image of himself. Or, of course, if you look at the ancient Sumerian origin of that, or the Hebrew origin of that text, it's, the gods made man in the image. Mm-hmm. The gods made, man in the image of them. So either way, it's this idea that there was this divine essence, and man is separate from beast, and that they are made in the image of a divine being. And so by depicting demons as an animal-human hybrid, like what they did, especially in medieval times, the artist would make these grotesque-looking animal-human hybrids. It created a sort of bestial perversion of God's image. And so by hurting the image of man, you're inadvertently hurting the image of God, and that is like sacrilegious, heretical, and scary in and of itself. And so it's, an idea that that's what it took to scare people at the time. And so, there's a lot of ways you can interpret it. Maybe that's exactly the case, or maybe it was the limit of human imagination, or maybe this is what people saw when they would summon the entities. And so that's another thing that, I don't completely rule out, which is going to sound really, wacky and falling down that rabbit hole again. But if you really look at it, and this is something that, in my newer book that's coming out later this year, I cover it a little more in depth, I think, because of, my research into the demonology aspect of the Sumerian religion, if you will. It's really not a religion, so I should call it a culture. Otherwise, I guess Pazuzu Algaret had a point, so I dare call it a religion, but most people do think of it as that. But this idea of their belief set, that they were contacting these entities. And so in a way, people still believe that. And I was talking to Whitley Strieber on his show recently and discussing his experiences, personal experiences with the entities he's in contact with, and the relationship between that and maybe demons. So this idea of aliens, demons, and all this. And so if you're familiar with, people and they have these experiences with psychedelics, DMT in particular, they see entities and they call them sometimes machine elves or clockwork elves. And you see this theme all through cultures and time. So they have the 7 sages or the Apkula in the Mesopotamian myth. You have the archons of the Gnostics, the serpent gods of the Far East and Central America, the titans of the Greeks, and the snake brothers of the Hopi, and jinn of Islam, demons, you name it. But it's, to me, something that I think in a way might actually be a cross-cultural effort to use language and descriptive technology to identify an actual human experience. Something where perhaps people are in contact with some kind of, maybe not extraterrestrial being, but maybe interdimensional, maybe supradimensional, maybe something that we just don't understand right now. But when you look at a common thread with this, it's like the elves and fairies and you name it. Something that happens is that you get in touch with these beings somehow, usually in a shamanic state. And that could be through trance, it could be through a psychedelic, it could be through some sort of ritualistic thing that a priest class person or a shaman would have access to. They would go into this other world, the shamanistic dimension, and they would contact an entity that sometimes is more of a trickster. So they weren't necessarily evil, yet they weren't entirely good. They were sort of funning around with you. They would giggle or laugh or play tricks on you, and often rely on optics to tempt you. So they'd show you what you could have or show you what is possible, and then basically trick you and laugh and make jokes at your expense. But also, if you did what they wanted or you were kind, they would share information with you that would be helpful to you back on, the, I guess, physical plane. And so this information usually took the form of a great technology. So the shamans or the priests would come back with this, mind expansion experience where they had a great technology to offer the masses. When they would do that, it would seem like these were benevolent entities. But in a way, if you look at the very archetypal tradition of that in and of itself, it's like, well, here you have a trickster entity who is showing you and tempting you, much like Jesus in the garden, Gethsemane or the desert rather, when he went off and, was shown what he could have if he fell into temptation. And, the idea is that, you're getting tricked, or maybe not, who knows? But a lot of times when you see the people and the cultures that were really into this and like summoning them. So the Aztecs, the Aztecs were good for this. They describe this exactly like what you'd have as a DMT experience. Or you'd see it even with the Nazis, when they would contact entities through channeling.
Like the Bull Society and all
yes,
that. Yeah,
absolutely. And so what you start to see, there's so many instances that I outline in other work that show that there comes a point where, yes, it's like you go into these trances, these people will get this technology, almost like have a relationship with these entities. And it seems well and good that they're helpful beings, that they're angels or spirit guides or the masters, And then you get the technology, you make all these things happen, but it's like, no one writes for free. So the next time you go into that, and that price sometimes ends up being sacrificing humans or your own kind, or mass bloodshed or ritualistic kind of things.
Well, you got to think, what got these cultures to decide to start killing people? One of the stories I wanted in your book, Evil Archeology, a part of it is, you're digging up the past and you're finding out things that were hidden and nobody knew about, like mass graves. That
Yes.
there's this town. There's a story in your book about this town in Germany. I couldn't pronounce the name if I could even remember it. But it was Neolithic.
The Neolithic, yeah.
Yeah.
Hexheim, Germany.
Yes. That is frightening. And
Yeah.
I mean,
It's gruesome.
Yeah.
It shows a darker side to humans that, maybe people don't want to be reminded of. And so, yeah, they at the site, they excavated a gruesome pit that showed these people in this society, this small town. They were basically a group of Neolithic farmers in Central Europe. And, you would think peace, love, agrarian society, that sort of thing. And then you find that they were having these huge cannibalistic carnivorous feasts.
Right.
And they were and they knew this because, they could look at the bones, and the bones showed traces of, scratches or scrape marks that would be consistent with the removal of meat. However, you would also find in this particular site that some of the bones were charred, and others, especially the vertebrae and long bones, those were kind of broken so that people would be able to use their fingers to dig inside and eat the marrow.
Oh, man.
And, of course, if these are human beings. And
what is this? How long? Was it 7,000 years ago?
So we're thousands of years ago. Yes, definitely. They were modern humans, obviously. We don't have the, written record of what they were thinking, but it's almost, I think that maybe adds to the mystique and the kind of the disturbing aspect of it is we are only left with this information. What do we do with this? What does it say about people and what have you? And so, they did a DNA analysis on some of the remains, and they show that the victims were migrants from other areas of Europe. Some as far away as France.
Right.
And
Why were they going there?
Yeah. Why were they going there? It could have been a religious element that drove people to, walk this far and maybe take part in some sort of ritualistic pilgrimage. I mean, it's really hard to say because there's just not enough evidence to, solve this. The only real good evidence is the factual data that we have, which is that there are, these bones, and they are the bones of, what's interesting too is, the bones did not show signs of malnutrition or poor health or any kind of wounds. And so these bones, these were not like if the theory would be, well, these were the sick, these were the infirmed or something, they just ate them. Nope, these were healthy people. I
remember it was like babies, old women, any kind of person.
Unborn fetuses, stillborns, children, women, and even men. Just anybody they could get.
How many roughly were there? Like, did they estimate bones? I mean, I know they're all mixed together, so I'm sure it's hard to tell, but...
Yeah, I think the report itself... see, and this is what also is strange, too. There's about 500 individuals that they were able to determine. It was hard to determine because if you look at the pit, it's just pieces and pieces of bone. It was basically a pit where they throw garbage, as if if you're eating, you're cooking out or doing something, and maybe it's like a big crab, Maryland crabs. You're out there crushing the crabs, you're eating, and you're tossing those shells.
You got to get that image.
Yeah, so that big messy sort of heap of the remains. That's what they were doing. So they had these bones that had been picked for the marrow and charred, and here we go, there's the bone pile. And so it's a mess. And so from that, the way they were able to identify is by, maybe piecing together some of them, but then also doing just DNA analysis. And they were able to determine that it was about 500 people they could, so far. They're still actually looking. They're excavating the site and still finding more. So right now, there were definitely confirmed 500 individuals. And these were torsos, limbs, parts of limbs, you name it. And so the area that was excavated, though, it was only half of the enclosure, and so they're estimating that there could be even 500 more.
One pit.
Yeah, and so they think there's probably thousands of these people involved. And another interesting thing that is just not explained in this is that this was not a long-term well, relatively speaking, this was not a long-term activity. This lasted 50 years. So
the lifespan of somebody.
Yeah. So that's a great observation, actually. So yes, that.
Well, who's to say? I mean, who's to say it's 500 people? I mean, who's to say it wasn't some massive chainsaw massacre serial killer family that everybody came there to eat their ancient chili? Chainsaw massacre too.
We really can't say. I mean, some people have theorized that this was a ritual thing, but of course that's like a running joke in archaeology that if you don't know what it is, it must be ritual, so it's really hard to say. But what you can say, a lot of times when you find this kind of discovery, it's due to some sort of environmental stress. It's malnutrition. People were driven to this sort of activity, or it was something in warfare or battle, or it was ritualistic or what have you. The difference here with this particular case is that it is just absolutely blatantly done for food purposes, as in like feasting.
They could have been healthy for the people. I mean, eating humans is, I don't think, if I understand it right, it's not good for you. I mean, it would make you very ill after a long period of time, I would think.
A lot of bad things can happen. Absolutely. A lot of bad things, like, it can be awful, but, so it is a really awful discovery, but that's just one of many things that happen, and it is one of those things that it goes unreported. I mean, it's technically reported. There's a report out there on it. I mean, that's how I was able to find out as well. And you can see the pictures and learn all about it, but where it's just not one that gets picked up readily in the news because they don't really have answers. They only have the answers that to the obvious questions of like, well, what happened? How do you know what happened? But in terms of what's the narrative, what's the history of it, what's the story? They don't know.
Is it the kind of thing that archaeology wants to push under the rug?
It's hard to say because being that this is a German excavation, I think in some cases it could be, and in other cases no, and it would really depend on the motivation behind who found this. I think in this particular case, not necessarily. I think that it's not, they're pushing it under a rug as much as they're just not wanting to shine a light on it.
True. Well, one of the things I thought that's always stood in the way of humans understanding their past is different governments, different religions. I mean, think about American archaeology, the early days, and England too. I mean, these countries are Christian countries, and their universities were Christian professors and archaeologists going out and discovering something that might go against their Christian religion, or somebody that's a Muslim. It might go against their Muslim religion. I mean, look at them, them destroying Buddhist temples. I mean, how much has been lost or destroyed because of another country, religion aspect that decides this isn't to our narrative?
A lot. I mean, that is exactly what happens, and it's just rampant. And that happened a lot in the past, even, and it happens to this day. But
Library of Alexandria, right? I mean, it burned to the ground. All the human knowledge right there gone.
Oh, and what's worse is it's happening today with the loss of the Brazilian National Museum. And that was a disaster. So, but you raise a good point about that. That is a good question to ask, though, about is this intentional or is this simply something that they don't want to advertise? And the answer, I think, is different in a lot of cases. And one of the cases that I point to in the book is the sacrifice to the morning star, and that is one that involves the Native Americans. And I believe that in this particular case, it is one that people don't want to promote because there is this sort of mystique, this popular notion that, Native American culture, first of all, is one culture. They often, this is where it gets a little on the racist side of things, where, people don't seem to understand that, widely, it's that the Native American is not one culture, that there's many cultures with very different beliefs and backgrounds, and and that they didn't all get along either. I mean, it was a very diverse time, and so when it's easy to say, well, Native Americans, and so what happens a lot of time is that they fall under what anthropologists call the noble savage idea. This idea that happened in I think 18th century and 19th century to an extent, where people looked at primitive people, this idea of, people who lived close to nature. They thought of them as primitive, and then they thought of them, of course, as savages. But instead of looking at them as though they were wholly bad, they were interested in them, and they thought, well, they're noble. They're actually good because that's the way that nature intended on humans to live. And so in a way, they exalted them. And you find that now in a lot of times where you have, natural cures or natural foods are good. Whereas it's like, well, maybe, but there are also poison things out there. But this idea that anything close to nature is inherently better than anything that's not. And, so as a result of that, there's a lot of this, idea that Native Americans overall were just peaceful, nature loving.
Not true. I'm Cherokee Indian, and I know we had slaves. I mean, as Cherokees.
It's diverse, and it's like, it's nothing that, yes, I guess if you want to beat yourself up about everything, as you can always have shame, but I look at it as all of us have an ethnic past of some sort that has points, low
Everybody's
points and
done
high
bad.
points.
Everybody's done
We've all
something.
done bad.
Yeah,
all of us
in this,
from that.
but then in this crazy world, everybody's got to make an issue out of everything. We do got a phone call I want to get to here. We got Zach on the line. How you doing tonight, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for calling in. You got a question for our guest?
I do. Dr. Lynn, it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I love hearing everything that you're saying. But really, the one question I do have, it dates back really to like the Christian origin story of demons, where it says that really demons are fallen angels that followed Lucifer and they're kicked out of heaven. My question to you is, in a lot of these ancient cultures, like ancient Sumeria, did they have an origin story or multiple origin stories for demons like Pazuzu?
Actually, yes, they all had sort of their own story, but they weren't necessarily different. They weren't set aside from the others. And in a way, with the Christian story, you have this one narrative where, there's the God creates everything, and you have this very typical story, and then there happens to be these entities. There's the angels, and then of course the angels, there's some that fall and they become demons, and so you have this kind of linear, almost simple understanding, but it follows this idea along that sort of makes sense in a way. And then if you look at how the ancients dealt with that, they didn't have it where there was this one sort of garden or paradise or even this heavenly realm that something had to fall or an event had to happen to create these evil beings. Instead, it was that they kind of already all existed, and that all of the otherworldly type beings were lumped in as demons. And so it's hard to use today's vernacular, because when you say demon, it's such a loaded word that it means bad creature. But in those times, pre-Christianity, it was just an idea that these were other entities,
like
and
forces
some
of
of
nature.
them, forces of nature, yes, and that some could be totally evil, but maybe not. They had a little good in them, but they were very much more nuanced and complex, and so they didn't have this one sort of pivotal, origin story. They all had their own origin stories, and there were groups of demons as well that had various origin stories that were different from the other, and most of the origin stories just really had to do with procreation. That, well, this was the son of this demon or that demon, or however that would go along, and very much setting the stage for the Titans and the Greek Olympian gods.
I always say there are original superheroes, like our original comic book superheroes was the Titans and that kind of thing. It was like man's pre-Marvel and DC universe.
I agree 100%. That is exactly a really good way to think of it. And then that's kind of the relationship that the human beings, the everyday human beings, would have on that with those demons, is that they, looked at them in that way. They followed their stories. They, collected the merch. They did all these things, and over time, the stories actually changed and developed and became more complex, or sometimes went through religious syncretism. So you'd have this group of deities and then this group of deities, and they just, we'll push them together and kind of make them one and the same. And so it wasn't this one defining factor that you have in a lot of the Abrahamic,
Right.
religion. And so that's something that is very different. And there's a lot of reasons that there could be for that, but are basically theological.
That answer your question, Zach?
That does answer my question. And you know what? It actually raises another question.
Go for it. You there, Zach?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm still here. No, I thought we cut out for a moment.
Nope. Go ahead.
It adds another question. Yeah, there's really another question that arises, because really where I live at, I mean, I live out in Maricopa County over in Phoenix. It really, where we're at, really, we hear a lot about the Holcomb. There were an ancient Native American tribe that lived out in the area, and the most unique aspect really of that culture is that they were able to build a series of canals that actually brought water into the valley where it's at, because really that's our main water source. Not only do we get it from rainstorms that come in, but we get it in from up north and all that. Have you heard about any stories maybe from like the Southwest or through your own research about many of these ancient tribes really consulting either these spiritual deities or ancient aliens, whatever it might be, that gave them this knowledge to be able to assist them in being able to make their lives a whole lot better? Have you come across something like that?
I have, actually. I'm not necessarily as familiar with, that tribe and their, where they may have gotten that information. And again, this kind of speaks to that idea that, well, what we're trying to say is that, these people couldn't have done this themselves. And I say, no, that's not the case. That's not what we're trying to say. We're just simply saying it's interesting to point out these really similar origin stories for technology. And it's just, it's interesting when you look at the connections and the connectivity that we have as a people to, myths from, what would be Arizona now all the way to maybe India. All these connections are quite fascinating. But, as I was saying in my, what I was speaking about earlier with regards to the Native American, questions about those ideas being maybe swept under the rug for maybe.
Oh, we just lost her. Hold on a second. That was weird.
I heard that little beep, beep, beep.
Yeah, that's the beep of death.
The beep of death.
You there with us, Heather? Oh, no. It's Regan.
Oh, sorry, I lost it.
Yeah, you went out.
Dropped the call. Apologize for that.
Sorry.
I hope my reception's okay.
The reception's, you're not as clear as you were. Keep talking. You still there? You still there?
Yes, I'm still here. So it's just one of those things where I think that a lot of the Native American stories and myths have actually not been shared as much as they could be, and I think some of that has been for maybe political reasons, or just different reasons that aren't so justified. And so as a result, if people want to dig into that, there are so many instances where Native Americans were contacting entities, whether they be good or bad, or however, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, I would tend to say that they, in most cases, were neutral, because it would depend on the outcome of what they were doing. But in some cases, the results weren't so good. And that's what I discussed in my book as a case with the Pawnees, who started sacrificing human beings to the morning star, and they actually had their own secret societies. And so it's a really interesting dynamic that you don't hear a lot about. And I think it's as a result of people just not wanting to go there. But if you really dig into it and look at the historical records, there are so many different cultures with their own rich histories. And something that you do see that is a common thread from either the Great Plains, the Ohio Valley, and all the way to the desert Southwest is that the shaman, the Native American shaman, had an ability to contact entities and get great wisdom from them. Now, what could be done with that wisdom, maybe because it fell into the hands of humans who are, maybe not so good at times, they did bad things with that. Or sometimes if it fell into the hands of the right person, they may have done really great things, like building, water canals or making great infrastructure for their people. And I think that something's very well supported in the historical literature.
Well, thank you, Zach, for calling in.
I hope that answers your
Heather,
question,
thank
Zach.
you so
Thanks a
much
lot
for answering
calling.
the questions. No, you answered them perfectly. Thank you so much. Jason, thank you so much for allowing me to call in. Both of y'all have a good night, all right?
You too, Zach.
Bye, Zach.
It's weird. After I get you back on, you were like crystal clear all night. And then as soon as we got, and that's like after you drop, now the reception's like the cell phone I expected when I first did a sound test with you.
Man.
I can hear you. You're coming through. It's just not as crystal clear as it was before. I don't know what happened with the cell line. Maybe the cell service is like, yeah, you guys are using up too much and knocked us off. I don't know. But
maybe it's the demon that infected your
Oh,
mouth
God.
that's coming into my phone.
I'm looking at Pazuzu on the cover of your book right now. I'm like, no, Pazuzu, no, Pazuzu. One of the things you brought up in that answer, is the interest is the commonalities between different cultures. One being how many of them had some kind of divine influence that taught them something, to the Native Americans, to the Sumerians, Christians, God taught them how to build an ark of the covenant and how to build an ark to sail on the sea. It's all this different influence from something outside of us. All these different cultures, all these different religions, all encapsulate that. It's not like I'm a human and I thought of this all on my own. No, it's some divine intervention that taught us something.
It is interesting. I think about the universality of the golden rule. It's a very simple idea, and so it could be argued that, well, it's so basic we can all just come up with it ourselves. But in a way, it's not. And when you look at its prevalence through many, many cultures that are seemingly unrelated and very much separated by distance, you have in Buddhism, there's a verse of hurt not others with that pains thyself. The general idea of the golden rule. And then ancient Egyptians have the same, where they say that which you hate to be done to you, do not do unto another. Of course, Christianity has that. Islam has that. Judaism, classical paganism. Plato says, may I do to others as I would they do unto me. And so and Pima, the Pima Native Americans had, do not wrong or hate your neighbor, for it is not you who you wrong, they who you wrong, but yourself, rather. So it's like there's so many examples. I could go on and on with all of these just differently worded sentiments over the same basic idea of just treat others how you'd like to be treated, that golden rule principle, which actually goes back to Sumerians as well. And so it makes you wonder, a legitimate question of, well, is this something that can just be innate in humans, which, I'm open to that, obviously, but is there something else? Could there be some sort of overall zeitgeist that people are able to
beginning
tap into?
lesson we all got at the beginning of time from something that we've all shared down different cultures. The other thing that interests me, commonalities, is the common monsters, like vampires. I always have been amazed and fascinated by the idea of vampires, because there seems to be some kind of vampire in every single culture, going way back. Some kind of version of a vampire. Like, where did that come from? Dragons. Look at dragons. Dragons are in so many different cultures that were not in touch with each other. But and as like vampires, a creature that shouldn't have ever existed, as far as we know.
Yeah, and it's so prevalent. These same ideas, like where do they come from? And of course, in that question, you can look back and find some of the most ancient writings. I know vampires in particular. They go back as far as I think Sanskrit. In India, they discuss the idea of vampires.
And where does that come from? If it's all these different cultures, all these things have the same kind of concept of something that sucks your blood, lives forever, an evil entity. The other thing that always fascinated me, because I have a fascination, so do my 7 and 3-year-old at very too young of ages, with zombies and vampires, is the idea of how much we focused on from the beginnings of time that we know of humans, that we buried our dead, that we feared our dead coming back. That's something that's always fascinated me. Why would we fear our dead coming back? It should be pretty prevalent. They're dead. They're not moving. But for some reason, we would do things like, you know, like the vampire graves they'd find where they, like, you know, put a stake through them or break their legs so they couldn't walk when they came back. You know, that's something that's always fascinating me. Why did we fear the dead coming back?
Yeah, that is interesting, because you would think that you'd want your loved ones to come back, but you know, sometimes what you find though is that in these vampire graveyards that, you know, archaeological excavations will, you know, uncover, as you said, like a stake through the heart. A lot of times there'll be other methods too, like a brick in the mouth, any way to make the body unable to be used again once it's been risen. And so they would sometimes take the arms and dismember them and put them far away from the body or in a different position, so that whatever would happen is they would not be able to come back as themselves easily. So yeah, that's interesting, because, you know, why wouldn't you want to see your old, you know, Uncle Bob coming back, and you didn't want that. And
because Uncle Bob wants to eat your brains. You know?
He wants to eat your brains. And so maybe it has to do with the idea that the dead, they look so awful when they come back, that that's a very frightening thing to see, as a human body, you know, sort of fallible and destroyed and withered in that, you know, to that level. But what you find when you see some of these, you know, these excavations, is that the bodies of these vampires, they weren't only destroyed, you know, for protective purposes, but they maybe had a pre-existing condition, that they had a deformity going in, that there was something already wrong with them, so they had been ostracized from the community at large, leading others to think that they were maybe a vampire or a witch or something to that effect, something supernatural but also bad. So maybe the idea was that, you know, you have a person who, you know, it's not necessarily Uncle Bob coming back to, you know, pull a quarter out from behind your ear and say hello. He was a bad person who died, and if they come back, you know,
like if you were bad enough, you're going to come back as a vampire. I know some cultures had that thought.
Yeah, so I think that's, you know, part of the reason. The other reasons, I mean, it's a little strange, because, you know, there are some cultures even now. I mean, you can look them up online. I forget it actually, the name of the culture exactly, but they dress up and embalm.
Yeah, we've had that on the World Wide Web of Weird before. Yes.
Yeah, and so in a way you think, well, I mean, they certainly don't seem to mind the look of the dead that way. And so,
well, have you seen those pictures? Are like, they look like they're going to come alive. These corpses, they bring them up, and they look like they're going to move at any minute and be a zombie or something. It's really creepy.
I love the attention to detail they give to. They don't just offer them funerary offerings like flowers or something. They give them cell phones and a pack of cigarettes, and, you know, all the things that, you know, modernity would want them to have, I suppose. So it's a little interesting, to say the least, but definitely gruesome pictures.
I mean, and think of you know, one aspect of them breaking the bones and trying to keep the dead from coming back. Then you look at ancient Egypt, where they mummified them and, you know, put all this stuff with their bodies, and, you know, gave them this whole like ritual thing, you know, to give them this afterlife. You know, that, you know, the way that we treated our dead throughout history, it's just, there's so many similarities between different cultures. And the like I said, the one thing that always fascinates me is the fear of the dead coming back. You know, my mind goes to, I'm into the fiction. You know, I theorize and speculate, but like, you know, an ancient zombie virus or something that made them that scared of the dead, something instinct in us that happened with us, that we were like, yeah, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. You know, that they do these things to the bodies. I mean, of course, burying the bodies was a health wise thing. They needed to do that, get the, you know, they carry diseases and stuff with bodies, and I'm sure they smelled. But when they actually desecrated bodies, how far back does that go, really? The desecration of a body and fear of it coming back. What do you think is like the oldest evidence of that?
I would say, you know, that I really couldn't be certain on that. I mean, I would think that there could be evidence of it going as far back as, you know, prehistory, but we wouldn't have we would be maybe speculating or taking educated guesses on that. But if I were to guess, I would say that if you consider human behavior and the fact that this is very ubiquitous, it probably has gone on ever since the beginning of, you know, funerary practices in general, maybe the dawn of consciousness even. But as far as like any actual data that I can point to say, oh, in this case, in this year, in this day, I couldn't really say for sure.
Yeah, it's just something that, like I said, it's always fascinating, the idea of this. Maybe it's my fear of a zombie apocalypse coming. I don't know, but there's this is innate fear of us with the dead, and now we're doing all kinds of weird stuff with our dead in modern times. Cryogenics and I don't know if you've seen, like, now they're doing kind of what those people are doing in the country. Some people are having these like funerals where they sit people up like they're just another patron at the funeral. I mean, it's just weird what humans do when it comes to death and how we deal with it. And going back to our earliest writings and evidence of our earliest civilizations, how they dealt with it, it just fascinates me. Now, we talk about like demons again. Let's get back to that a little bit. One thing we didn't get into, talk about a Christian story about how people use demons for good and bad was Solomon. That's something that's always fascinating, is the stories of Solomon and, Solomon's ring and how he could control the demons. And that's one of those stories. It's like, why not to mess with demons, kind of like in the Bible, because things don't turn out well for Solomon. I mean, how much, do you think something like Solomon actually existed? I mean, is there any evidence of that?
Yeah, there is. There's some enough. I would say that Solomon existed to now. Now, he's taken on a legendary status, and so a lot of the stories that are discussed about him, with no idea if any of that could be possibly true. And clearly, some of the ones with the supernatural elements, I mean, those are often found in grimoires or writings that can be traced not to primary sources, but secondary sources dating to the Middle Ages and those things. So, but these are stories that people subscribed to or believed or felt that accurately depicted what happened. And so, you mentioned the Solomon's magic ring. I mean, the legend there is that he had this ring that could conjure demons. And at first, of course, you'd say, well, who would want demons? Yeah, that sounds like very demonic and all these ideas, because we're modern and this is how we think of it. But at that point, it was a little different. If you could get those demons and maybe you'd be so powerful as to control or command them, as Solomon was, you could make those demons do your bidding and do something, good for you, like build a temple. And, that's great. Although, as you mentioned, it didn't go so well for him afterwards. But,
right. It usually ends bad when you're messing with demons.
Bad. It's the idea you made a deal with the devil. That idea that, you who really does have the power, even if you think you can conjure them and get them to do your bidding. How are you certain that you are actually controlling them, or if in some way they're not manipulating you? And that's just another one of those common themes we see in these stories, like over and over again.
Playing with fire. Playing with
be
fire.
Prepared.
But you got to wonder if some of those people that are into this Babylonian religions and stuff like that, like the corporations, these secret Illuminati people, whatever, if they're looking for Solomon's key ring, I mean, the kind of power that that would give them, or they think it would give them, you have to wonder how many people really truly are looking for those kind of items.
I believe that's true, and I think that we can see that to this day, as you said, with some of these elite people or whatever they're doing. I mean, if you look right now at Silicon Valley, there's this huge number of these tech elites that are starting to realize they can pierce the veil of reality and make contact with strange entities, and they're doing these things
like ayahuasca,
having these things where they can go in and try to take these psychedelics and induce these states of mind so that they can improve technological advances and progress. And this is something that's actively going on right now. And it's a little eccentric, but I think that people don't really inherently change too much. And if you put yourself in a position 4,000 years ago where you also had wealthy, eccentric people, maybe they were in there channeling and summoning entities and having the same motivations behind it. And so I just guess I don't think that much has changed, even though it has. I think the core of human experience, there's a still common thread that we share with the people that walked the path behind us. And so that even now, I do believe that some of these individuals that have more money than they do sense at this point are playing with fire and maybe trying to do things, and to varying degrees of success and to varying degrees of safety.
One of the things you explore in your book, you talk to two people, I believe, that or both have been on my show before, is Bill Bean and Mike Ricksecker. You kind of get a paranormal investigator's take on it, and you get a demonologist,
yes,
exorcist take on it. And Bill Bean, Mike, both great people. Bill's going to be back on the show. But one of the things again is like, can objects be cursed or possessed? What did you find with that? I mean, can objects be actually possessed? I mean, are these guys, these wealthy people, getting what they kind of asked for? They get a Pazuzu statue. The next thing you know, they're their head's spinning backwards and they're puking up pea soup.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I think this was a topic I was not sure about myself, because I'm not a paranormal investigator, and I have my doubts about that in particular. And so I thought that the best way to treat the subject was to call on the experts and get their opinion. And so yes, I contacted Bill Bean, and he is excellent, as I'm sure you know, and of course Mike Ricksecker as well. I really respected his level of professionalism and attention to detail, that he wasn't just out there playing around with night vision goggles and having jump scares and trying to do things. That he really does take an approach of, he takes a great approach to things. And so I thought, well, who better to ask? And let me see what they have to say about it. And so, it was very enlightening. I think that both of them had their own sort of takes, and Bill Bean was a lot more open to the idea that objects themselves can be possessed. And he discussed that, and it actually made me really concerned about my own objects, because
I'm sure you got some stuff. Don't you have some stuff? I'm sure, as your interest, you got to have some stuff. You got to wonder. We had, the first time I had Bill Bean on, we had Anita Intenzo and her son. They were in an episode with Bill on a haunting about their experience of her friend was an anthropologist and died, and she took over his estate and had all these relics in his house. She had to figure out who goes to what, and she kept a lot of it. And then, of course, when she was done with his estate, moved to his house, all the paranormal activity she was facing at his house followed her to her house. And there was this artifact that changes shape that he warned her about through a medium. It's an incredible story, an incredible experience she had, and definitely Bill's perspective. Yes, I was just going to be cursed or haunted or possessed, and that you have to wonder how many archaeologists out there might have got something attached to them by digging one of these things up.
This is something that is, something I wonder about as well. And as a collector myself, I, took a second look at some of the things I had sitting around me after I spoke to Bill. Thankfully, he gave me a blessing and spoke to me about this. And, I feel pretty good about where I'm at now. But it wasn't an easy book to write. I'll just put that out there. I went in maybe a little lighthearted on the subject that shouldn't be taken so lightheartedly.
No.
I went in, I started off obviously kind of inspired by a movie and a book, which is, quite silly. And I thought, isn't this interesting? And it's not, but it opened me up to ways to looking at things that maybe I hadn't anticipated were as serious as they were. And so it was really a learning experience for me writing the book. And in some ways I came out of it, I don't know. I'm not sure what to think. Maybe I did have a lot of experiences.
Do you have anything weird happen in your house? You're going to be like, was it one of my artifacts? Oh no!
Yeah, it actually was a disaster. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to include any of that information in the book, because I thought, this isn't about me per se, and I don't know if I want to put that in there. And then,
but it's a big part of it,
But it was a part of it, and so I thought, well, to give an honest look at the subject matter, I need to at least put this in here. And so I discussed, in the afterward, what happened to me and while I was writing the book. And so, it really began when I was collecting research for the book itself. I went to a thrift store, which I do on occasion, to look for, what I call retail archaeology. I go through and look at, things and try to collect teacups and whatnot. And I looked at the ground, and something caught my eye, and it was this black book, really old and cool. And I was like, what is this? And so I looked at it, and it was the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology. And
I would have bought it too.
It was like $1.75.
Oh, I would have bought it.
Wow, you can't.
Sold.
Perfect. Sold. And so I thought, how cool, because it was serendipitous. It was right there waiting for me. And after I had decided I was going to write about this, and so I bought it, and I didn't know what was in it, and so I just took it home. But as I started working on this book, this is like, maybe a week later, I was at a library and I was studying scans of 16th century devil's packs, and my heart started racing and I started shaking really bad, and I fell to the floor, and the librarian had to actually call an ambulance to take me to the hospital. And it was quite embarrassing, I must say. I just collapsed, and my heart was beating at peak beats per minute. And the hospital checked me out and released me and said they really had no explanation. And they sent me to a cardiologist. And so, it happened again after that. But that time, in between me waiting to get to the cardiologist, it happened again at another library. Oh. And I thought, well, something's up with these libraries.
Right.
So
They're not supposed to be that exciting at a library.
Exactly. And so I managed to drive myself to the emergency room at that point because I did not want the embarrassment of another, ambulance ride. And so they released me with no explanation. And so these attacks, though, started to come and go just all the time, particularly when I was working. And then, nightmares started to happen. And every night I started having these terribly vivid dreams about very specific demons. Oh my God. Attributed this, it was really scary, and I don't usually have nightmares like that, but I just attributed it to the research I had been doing. So, it was on my mind, I went to sleep after researching, and therefore that's what's going on. And so I started waking up now in the middle of the night, trembling, and my room was freezing cold, and I would have my teeth chattering, and it was just awful. And I started thinking, my heart was beating like crazy, and I'm like, are these panic attacks? Why am I having panic attacks? And so after discussing it with the physician and going through a battery of tests at the Cleveland Clinic, the cardiologist told me that nothing was wrong. I was perfectly healthy.
You're like, I want something to be wrong that you can diagnose, please. We got to go to our last commercial break, Heather. So
they put me on a Holter monitor, and they knew something was going on, and they had me see an electrophysiologist, and they said something was interfering with the electrical pathways of my heart. Oh. And I said, what? And they said, well, we don't know. I got so many second opinions, but then they said basically I had what's called a sudden onset of inappropriate sinus tachycardia. And I was like, okay.
That sounds like a bunch of crap that we don't know what's wrong with you.
Right. So they called it inappropriate because they couldn't find the appropriate trigger for why my heart was racing, and it was going so fast. And so, that took many months to get that diagnosis. And over those months, I just tried to power through and write the book and do what I had to do. But then one night, I started getting all these little challenges along the way. And so one night, I was working really late, finishing a chapter, and the electricity in my house surged so badly that an outlet just burst into flames, and it ignited. Yeah, it ignited a stack of National Geographic magazines that were like right next to the outlet. And had I been asleep, I do believe the whole house was gone up in flames because it was huge fire. And I didn't really put anything to that. I just thought, wow, I need to call an electrician, And so all throughout this whole experience, I kept getting more and more ill. I was having trouble reaching my, writing deadlines, and my room was getting increasingly cold where I would both sleep and write. And so during this time, I had a cat, Bailey, who I lovingly refer to as my research assistant, and he started getting very weak and ill. I took him to 3 different vets, and they just couldn't tell me what was wrong with him. So I'm going through all this, and it's just like terrible. And the night that I finished the book, my cat, Bailey, just collapsed. And the next morning, he was gone. And I was just devastated. And, and so I'm not superstitious, but I would have to say that it started making me very superstitious at that point. And I had not experienced anything like that. And so I figure, well, maybe all this time that I'm spending thinking of all these negative things or whatever, maybe it just was wearing me down physically and maybe spiritually or something. But, I couldn't help but think about it. And I told a friend of mine who is a psychic. She kind of theorized that the book that I had brought from the thrift store had an entity attached to it, and that perhaps it was causing all these problems, and I was open to it causing these problems since I was openly engaging in this activity of researching this. Yes, I invited it in, that it put itself out there, and I took the bait, and I invited it in with that, and that somehow this entity might have jumped from the book into my cat. Sort of like, I guess then,
They say
and
cats
that cat was
protect
in-
you from evil spirits.
Yeah.
We can get
Yeah,
it. We
but
got to
that-
go, Heather. We got to go to commercial break. So we'll come back. We'll talk more about that because I had an experience with losing a cat during my shadow person experience.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I get a little bit chills thinking about that.
Oh, I just was there. I have chills too. It's awful.
All right. We'll be back after this short commercial break, guys. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon. Thank you. Muted myself too soon. Thank you to Dave Harding for donating to the show, $20. Thank you so much, Dave. Everything you guys donate to the show helps us so much. Helps us do the StreamYard and restream out to Facebook and YouTube. Please go check out our Patreon page and donate. Help out this show. All right, guys. Back after a short commercial break.
Intercepted the transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hi, I'm Barry, owner-operator of Barry's Barometer Barn. Lately, I bet you've been lying awake at night asking yourself, how many barometers do I really need? Well, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we think you need more than one. Otherwise, we're going to go out of business. Remember, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we don't know the meaning of high-pressure sales. Come on, folks, buy another barometer. I'm trying to put my kids through college. I've got a family to support and a secret mistress who isn't cheap.
Visit Barry's Barometer Barn, 000 Storm Drive. Come on, folks, buy a barometer. I'm Barry's older brother, Larry, and every time one of you people walk past the store without coming in, Barry beats me.
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon Leicester Square.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Phantasm, the film that puts the fun in funeral. And as for a fiendish story, it does have a burial plot. Come prepared to scream, because if this one doesn't scare you, you're already dead. Phantasm from AFCO Embassy Pictures. Rated R under 17, not admitted without parent or guardian.
Hello, midnight preview tonight, UA Westwood Theater.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the paranormal and want to hear from leading researchers in the field, join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
Be gone.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest has been Dr. Heather Lynn, author of Evil Archeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics. And maybe tonight, us talking even about this has given us some, I've had some weird issues tonight with the show, with my mouse being possessed, my audio setup doing weird things. So I don't know. I mean, even when we had Bill Bean on, I mean, we got the whole show cut off. So it seems whenever we get into this subject, something weird happens. But you can call in if you got a question for our guest tonight. The phone lines are open. You can call in at 219-230-4444 or a Skype ID 00JBland00. Call in, ask a question of our guests, or maybe you have some something that's happening with a haunted object. I'd love to hear about it. It fascinates me how something, an entity could attach itself to something and then attack you just because you bought it. I mean, it takes antiquing to a dangerous level. Antiques Roadshow, the Demon Edition. That's what you wonder, is how many of these objects carry something with it, and especially these objects that are thousands of years old. What could be held to them that could harm somebody? Or just looking into it, like Heather did it affect her? Was it the book she bought? You wonder what in the world can attach itself and attack somebody just because they have an object in their possession. We get into those subjects. We have a little bit of time left, but don't hesitate to call in and ask a question. But let's get back to our guest. You still there with me, Heather?
Yes, I am. Hope the reception's a little better. I apologize if it's on my end.
You do sound a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah. It was like when we got cut off and you came back, and you know what? You're not the first guest I've had that happen, where suddenly the phone line dropped, and then when I bring them back, it's like suddenly that great phone quality is gone. So it's something with the cell service. I think it's weird, but oh well, we still got you here, and so that's an amazing experience you had writing this book. Maybe you don't look at it as amazing; it's pretty terrifying. But I mean, do you in your mind, do you feel like there was ever an entity that was actually trying to do something to you? I mean, you had these dreams about demons, or was there anything specific, like a specific one?
Actually, that's funny. You're the first person to ask me that, and I have to say yes, there was a very specific one. And I just, like I said, I just chalked it off to, well, I had been doing research. Although looking back on it, I was doing research on many different demons.
Right.
And so this one, in particular, it did stand out to me, and that's the Asmodeus demon that I write about that too. And that demon, what's strange is that, I found during my writing, and this is after I was having some of the nightmares of this entity, he was, I don't know, like the patron demonic saint, I guess, if you will, of authors. And in some cases, people in ancient times, medieval times, and many different times where this demon was, exalted or studied or discussed, it was said that people who were writing a book would sometimes, I guess, for lack of a better word, or summon or call upon this demon to have the demon write the work through them. Like, so it was almost as if, I mean, it's really wonky, but this idea that, some people, when they write, they would summon a demon, sort of like how, the biblical verses or books would be divinely inspired. There could be the opposite.
Wasn't there that monk who wrote out like this whole huge book of the devil? Wasn't Amadeus that he made a deal with to write the book? Oh, what was it? And it's a famous huge book, like, very old. I can't think of the time, the monk. I know, but you know what I'm talking about, and I'm pretty sure it was Amadeus that he made the deal with.
Yes, I can't. Devil's Bible. It was.
Yes.
Devil's Bible.
Yes.
Yes. And it's because it had this. It was like Codex. Yes, the Devil's Bible, or I think there's another name for it. It's a Codex of some sort.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think this is the Bible that. In it had some huge illustration of demon, and it was really awful, and so they often called Devil's Bible. But also because it was said that he wrote it in a night. After
that's like really big, really long. No way.
It's huge, yeah.
And drawings and intricacies to it. No way somebody could do that in a night.
And it was attributed to that demon helping him do that. Some say so. Yeah, there's a lot of that you find where people, even in modernity, have credited this demon with helping them write things. And,
that's a scary thought that you might have called upon that, and that's what you dreamt about, was that specific demon.
Yeah, and if I were even more maybe superstitious or less grounded, maybe I would say this was a demon's attempt to lure me or get me to say, yes, I'm going to welcome you in. But of course that didn't happen, because this was definitely not an inspired book by any means of anything divine or otherwise. This was all wholly my own work, of course, but it was interesting, and it was a little disturbing because it was quite frightening. And again, I just thought of it as nightmares I was having, but I think the thing that really made me pause was that a lot of this stopped the moment I stopped writing the book. And not all of it. Now, what's interesting to note is that I spoke to my publisher, when I sent the manuscript in, and like later after all the editing, I was speaking to somebody at the publishing company, and they just happened to mention that. Oh, it was so funny. The day that we went to print the book, the printing presses would not work. There was a huge storm that came in, and it killed the electric, and the book was late, because the book couldn't get printed for a while because the storm had taken out the electricity, which incidentally, Pazuzu being the demon of the south or the storm, yes, and so that was a little. They thought it was kind of humorous, but I looked at
like that nervous chuckle, like, hey,
yeah, exactly, because it's like, well, I passed the manuscript is out of my hands. And it is out of my home and done, and everything seems to go back to normal. In fact, my heart issue went away completely. I totally am fine. That is so weird, Heather. Haven't had anything like that happen again. I've been to plenty of follow-ups, and the explanation there, the cardiologist said, "Oh, well, sometimes these things just reverse. Maybe it was hormones." I'm like, okay.
Thanks a lot.
Sure, thanks.
We do got another person waiting on hold here. We got Mike on the phone line. How you doing tonight, Mike?
Good. I was going to ask her if the Dybbuk box, if that's just a myth or something like that, or is there anything
Hollywood?
Is there anything to that Dybbuk box, or is it just a bunch of BS?
It's a great question, Mike.
Does she know?
That is a great question. I did cover that in the book. I looked at that case in particular, and the box itself, I mean, the idea comes from a legitimate source, and that is a legitimate, actual theory and a belief set and this whole thing. But the box itself has been very popular.
Yeah, you can get them on eBay now.
I would have to say that at this point, I personally think it's hoaxy, and I'll probably make a lot of people mad by saying that, but I just got to go with the facts as I see them, and the facts as I see them at this point. This was something that in Jewish tradition, this stems from something real. So there's a grain of truth in it, but at this point, I think that it's been turned into a money making opportunity, and it's more of a sideshow. So that's unfortunately for anyone who wants to believe. I just don't think that's a credible thing, and so no, I would tend to say no.
I always look at these things too, Mike, is that maybe something paranormal happens when somebody gets one of these Dybbuk boxes, but not because it's a Dybbuk box, but because it's the expectation and the human. I swear humans affect their own reality, and if you really believe this box is evil, then you're probably inviting evil in. and giving it the power.
I think that's a really great explanation for it. I think that sometimes maybe if there are these energies and they could be lurking around, I think that's one of the things that if you're open to it, and by open, I mean, and I put this in the book too, I discuss this idea of fear. Fear being the thing that it weakens you to, and
invite something in.
Negativity.
I think it invites something in. You give it that fear, that emotional expectation. That you expect. I always compare it to the cave on Dagobah with Luke. I'm a Star Wars freak, but he goes into the cave. Yoda tells him not to take his weapon with him. He takes his weapon with him though, because he's afraid. And what does he face? He faces Darth Vader. I mean, because he got what he came in with. He came in expecting a fight, and he got one. It's if you expect there's going to be a demon in the Dibbit box, well, you might get a demon. Even though the Dibbit box was just like a taped over thing somebody mailed to you. That's nothing to do with the Dibbit box. That's just my theory on it.
I think that's a great theory. I would tend to agree with that, especially when you consider some of the input Bill Bean had regarding what he calls warrior mode. The idea you need to stay vigilant and defensive towards those things. So maybe on a day if someone's defenses are down, and yes, it's a box, but if for whatever reason something like that could be a portal to another dimension, if you will, or something that could
just an invitation.
Facilitate. Exactly.
You gave money for a box that had a demon in it? Well, here you go. Here you go. Well, thank you, Mike, for calling in, bud.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk a little bit about voodoo dolls, that'd be nice too. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's another good one. That's I mean, it's a doll purposely made to do something. But we had Hoodoo Sen Moise on, and he said there really wasn't like a voodoo doll like you see in Hollywood or anything like that. But there's definitely a belief in them. Back to Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. Short round saved the day. Thanks, Mike. But that is a good interest too. Is how can effigies and stuff relate to the power that it has over people? How far back does that idea go of something? Like you said, you have the demons being represented with the figurines. That idea.
I think that's a form of sympathetic magic that you can see going.
Exactly. That's what I was looking for. Sympathetic magic, or representation of your idea, your focus, for sure. I think that's a lot to do with it. But of course, Hollywood gets all these different perceptions in our minds of what's not reality. But I also get back to the Dibbit box thing. I'm a big fan of the idea of the Tibetan idea of topas and thought forms, and that we create these things in a way like a psychokinetic agent. We create these monsters or these demons in a way with our own thoughts. Oh, did I lose you?
I think for a moment you cut out a whole lot. So
no. Hope we're not losing. It's like the demons know. The demons know. I mean, I'm telling you, when we had Bill Bean on halfway through the show, we were getting really into it. Gone. The whole stream went down.
Wow. I believe it. It happens a lot. It happens and it's a little weird.
It is. I mean, it's like, is it us doing it to ourselves, or is it just because we focus in on these things? One of the things we're getting towards the end of the show, but you got into is
I'm losing you a lot, but I will say maybe we should start talking about puppies and kitties, or Dancing with the Stars, or something else that's really banal, and then maybe the reception will come back.
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, actually.
Okay, good. Okay, puppies and kittens.
Keeping up with the Kardashians.
Oh,
what else
God,
is popular? No.
I'll shut it down.
Talk about all that, right? Yeah.
You said you're writing a new book. What's the new book going to be about?
Well, I have a new one that's slated to come out in sometime. I'm not sure when they're going to put it out. Maybe closer to winter or spring, and that is called The Anunnaki Connection. Ooh. And that is going to cover a lot of those ideas about the beings, the Anunnaki, and maybe their connection to an extraterrestrial experience or even demons. But it's maybe a little more of the questioning some of Sitchin's interpretations of things. And so, a lot going on there, but just basically looking at the Anunnaki. And so that'll be out soon enough. And
I want to read that book, Heather. I really want to read that book bad because, that's something I've been fascinated with. Stitchin has his critics.
Yeah. Well, that's the one that's coming out. And then this month I actually started writing a new book, and that's very much just in the raw, just going on with that. And the working title is Xenoarchaeology, The Final Frontier. And that one examines the science, theory, and current work in interplanetary archaeological research and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And so in this book, what I'm doing is discussing the legitimate but often hidden plans that academicians and corporations and government and military contractors are making to develop and implement sort of secret archaeological space programs, and what that looks like. What would be implication?
If there was a civilization on Mars and there's artifacts left there, then you're gonna have space archaeologists, Mars archaeologists, that are going to want to look into who were these people and what was left there. I was a big.
And they've already.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and they've already addressed that this is a concern because there's not really a lot of best practices established or methodologies, and so right now there's a lot of research going into how could we actually feasibly do this, and what do we do if we found something? What does this mean? And a lot of that's being hidden because it's a little too out there for people, and they don't really have a solid foothold on it all. And so what happens when they don't have a good idea is they open it up to corporations to kind of plug in their ideas. And so there's this big
they want to make money.
Bunch of idea sharing and some directions that they're going. So what I do in this effort is I'm trying to look at whether or not it's going to be feasible, whether or not it's already been done or is being done, and basically what does it mean. And I touch on the ancient alien phenomenon at that too, like the idea of, what would this mean? What does it look like? And just all of the questions having to do with, I guess, paleo contact, as I like to call it.
Well, they need a reference. I'm a big Star Trek fan. They need to go back to The Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard, because he was into the alien archaeology. Well, that's what I loved about that character with Jean-Luc Picard. I don't know if you're Trekkie or not, but I am. And, he was fascinated by all these different ancient alien cultures, and there was alien archaeology. And I'm like, that's what I'd be doing in the future. That's the kind of archaeologist.
That's what I'd like to do. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm going to endeavor in this work. And it was really also just fueled recently with the Joe Rogan interview with Bob Lazar. When I was listening to that casually, and then my ears just perked up when I heard Lazar claim that, quote, at least one of the flying saucers was part of an archaeological dig. That means it's not just old, but it's ancient. And so when I heard that was the explanation for where, they had these, where they got them. And, I thought, wait a minute, what? And so I thought about that. There has to be some record of that then somewhere, either formal or informal.
Somebody dug it up.
Discovery. And somebody dug it up, and somebody has to talk. And so I have a few ideas already, though, about how to find out exactly some different research methods and some contacts that I have, and also just a preliminary process of elimination. I already have a few contenders for it.
Another book in the progress.
Yeah, I think I'm going to add it to the current book because it's so important to get out, especially if I can really confirm some of my suspicions.
See, but
I'm working with.
Your mind went right where my mind went when I listened to that interview, which I believe. Honestly, I think that interview with Joe Rogan was better than the documentary they made.
By far.
So much, because you didn't have to listen to that weird guy talk in the background. But, but it was that interview got to a lot of stuff. Joe Rogan being like, "Whoa, dude," But for me, it's like I've heard a lot of this. But that one I didn't hear before. In all the interviews I've heard of Bob Lazar, I don't remember hearing him ever say anything about them finding this an ancient UFO. And my ears perked up, and my thought was the same thing. Is like, okay, if that was dug up, who did it? When was it? Was it the Nazis when they were going out looking for all this kind of stuff back in World War II?
Right.
Or was it an American dig? Where was it in the world? I mean, all these questions. Like, hold on, Bob Lazar. Hold the horses.
Exactly. Hold on, buddy.
We need to know more on that one. Oh yeah, your brain went exactly where mine went. So you think you might be able to dig in and maybe find some evidence, maybe of like an archaeological dig? Oh, that's amazing,
I do.
Heather.
I know that sounds quite bold. But
It doesn't.
I
think it's
that
awesome.
If I did not believe that I had a pretty fair shot at actually locating where that could have been found and had been found, if it is true. And so that's the thing. And so it might be a wild goose chase, but that's
It's
part
worth
of the
it.
adventure.
It's worth it.
Exactly.
Because I mean, if you find a dig where they suddenly close things down, and you got to be thinking about like, okay, it's got to be a dig where like, yeah, we got to find all that we got something incredible going on here, and then suddenly everything shuts down and we found nothing to see here, people. It's got to be something like that. For them, if they found a flying saucer or something like that, you got to wonder. I mean, there's the Baltic Sea anomaly, the thing that was like at the bottom of the ocean looks like a flying saucer. You wonder if there's those kind of things. There had to been, we've had these alien crashes in the 40s. They talk about Russia having their own, and different ones in the United States. UFO crashing in Mexico. If that was happening then, it could have happened thousands of years ago. These things obviously have technical problems like we've had today, but they crash. So there's got to be, and there could be another one out there somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know, I have quite a few friends and connections and people who are helping me in this regard, and I'm very grateful for that. I've been talking to Don Ecker and some people getting on the maybe the more nuts and bolts aspects of ufology, because see, where I'm coming from is the maybe social scientific approach to things, the archaeological approach, this whole different way of looking at it. And right now, in ufology in particular, it's really dominated by people who are looking at the engineering aspects and the hard science approach. And that's very important and very good, but it also leaves a big gap that I can go in and help fill with other things. And it also gives me the ability to...
I'm interested in the technology part. I am, but we should be more, really the big interest should be the archaeological part, the part of how aliens have been interacting with us for thousands of years. How they affected our society. When we talked about people getting this divine knowledge, some people say they don't come out with that the government knows, but it would destroy the world if they came out with it, because it would destroy religions, it would destroy everything because of how they've been involved in our lives since the beginning.
Yeah. So to me, those are the important questions as well.
That's why I'm interested in your book. You said you got coming out as the Anunnaki. Something, of course, their name, you could have a drinking game every time that comes up on Ancient Aliens,
right.
but they are, it's fascinating. There's different, everybody, I've always been fascinated by the Stitchin's work and all that, but, there's other people's theories. He kind of drowns out a lot of people because he was the main voice. But, I mean, the Anunnaki were human-like to animal-like to, there was like different kinds of Anunnaki. It's just such a fascinating aspect.
What is also very important to note is, like what you said, his voice kind of overshines everything else. But another thing to realize is that when he came out with that information, it was many decades ago, really, and that, a lot of the information has been stagnant ever since.
Yes.
But that's not because the research has been. And in fact, what I do in this new book that I have coming out very soon is I go back and look at all the new records, the old records, and expand on that research and show all the things that have happened since then, including, as you mentioned, the things about them, the Anunnaki being very human-like and then eating and whatnot. I have in this book the actual recipes and menus that they had for the Anunnaki, what the Anunnaki specific gods like to eat, how they wanted it prepared, everything down to their daily lives and interactions, and those all come from legit primary sources from the cuneiform tablets. And these are a lot of the things that often get overlooked because people are saying, well, let's look at this information that came out in like maybe the 70s or the 80s. And, there's so much more to sort of paint a more comprehensive.
It's like we need to dig further than Anunnaki thing, go beyond Stitchin's work and really dig in this, because they could be the real evidence of extraterrestrial influence in humans from the beginning of time, but we need to dig further into it, go beyond Stitchin's work. Like you said, I felt that it's been stagnant for years. We keep hearing the same thing over and over again. It's we need more info. We need more info.
We need more info, and it's there. So let's try to get it out there to everybody, and it's definitely something to look forward to. Well,
Heather, I want to get your new book when it comes out, and I'd love to have you back on to talk about it. That's a whole other rabbit hole to go down.
Anytime, and definitely I will send you one of those books as soon as it comes out, of course.
Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, I am so, everything tonight. Just like I said, I told you at the beginning of the show, time goes by so fast and never get to cover all the stuff. But we didn't even get, we didn't even get to cover. Can you take a guess? We talked about it earlier before the show. Mesopotamian toilet demons. We didn't even get into that. We didn't even get into the toilet demons, people.
Well,
go read your book.
Everyone will have to read that.
Yeah, go read your book. Mesopotamian toilet demons. Yes, real thing. People believed in a toilet demon. That's a scary thought. I've had some toilet demons myself. Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. Again, we got to get you back on the show. That's it, guys. Next week we'll have Avion Erwin, if I got that right. She's got a book out, Water Magic. We're going to talk about water magic next week. Same bad time, same bad channel, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific time. And don't forget to help us out by going to Patreon to donate to the show. $2 a month gets you exclusive access to podcasts. We're going to be adding to that channel. Again, thank you to David Harding for your donation tonight. That helps out big time. We're using apps like StreamYard tonight. But that's it, guys. We will see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great night, and thank you all for your support. And thank you again, Heather. You have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.